Thank you. On the affirmative, from Emory, Michael Beckley and Henry Liu. Very nice love in the room. On the negative, from North Texas, Nirav, Patel, and Johnny Prieur. Our judging panel tonight will consist of judges chosen from their own regions to represent the region in this final round. From the Northwest, we have Jason Russell from Gonzaga. You can clap for Jason if you want.
My ass.
From the West, we have Christopher Skiles from Cal Poly. Southern California region, Adam and Simons from CSU Fullerton. Rocky Mountain region, Colin Matheson from Idaho State. North Central region, Scott Varda from Iowa. Mid-America, Heather Walters from Southwest Missouri. The East Central, Mike Eber from Michigan State. Southeast Central, Ed Lee, University of Alabama. From the East, we have Reed Sawyer, U.S. Military Academy. Our official timekeeper tonight will be Brian Grayson from the University of Alabama. I'd like to congratulate both teams for making it this far, and we're ready for the 1AC.
I had a little blue sheet of paper. Yeah, what else? Hey, where did all go? Oh, there we go. All right. I really want to take this opportunity to say that I'm incredibly honored. We can, like, speak for Mike that we're incredibly honored to have this opportunity to participate in the final round in front of all y'all. So many familiar faces from so long ago. But I also want to use the soapbox to thank some people. First, the tournament officials, particularly ML Santos, for their hard work and service. This is an unbelievable tournament. The second, I really want to thank Bob and Greenstein, and literally, obviously, we would not be here without their incredible kindness to us. And third is Melissa Wade. The reason I'm at Emory, the reason we're debating, and for all our inspiration and direction in life, helping all of us get out of troubles when we really need it. And also along those lines, I really want to thank Dave, James, and Ricky, and all the rest of the drunk debaters over to the left, and you're probably here throughout the rest of the debate. But thanks to everyone. Really appreciate it. All right, everyone ready? The plan of the United States Congress should act in restriction via the overall aggregate agricultural subsidies Title 1, 2, 3, 5, and 10 of the 2002 Farm Security Rule Investment Act will clarify change. Bench 1 is market liberalization. First is market liberalization, subsidy cuts, increased development growth, and welfare in developing countries, solving food insecurity. But no 2002 export subsidy touched countries, displaced agricultural production, export developed countries, a substantial positive effect developed country products, potential protection, export protection, industrial economy, with net welfare, decrease in actual protection was industrial economy reduced. South the risk of similar conclusion, but historical protective spread negative effects on the production and employment result of industrial economy. Agricultural policy continues access to international trade is usually associated with the growth rates of the economy. Sampled 71 developed countries, agriculture strongly correlated with overall economic growth. This success story new list just East Asia economic carrier distance invested strongly very early and rural and agricultural development. Growth to have greater impacts on the direction of poverty and national trade to help decrease employment and wages further leave behind the poverty may cause of food security and national trade opportunity to help with the food safety concerns. Declining food prices led to sharp reduction in total food bill. They all find that food consumption availability in developed countries small songs show the contribution trade to food security to the country increased economic growth and poverty seem enhanced food security seems elimination substantial reduction of something industrial economy. Moreover, the plan provides income to agricultural workers which increases food security. This is code in 2001. Keep the rural center, gravity, poverty, agriculture, rural development center for reducing poverty, food security, developing country, every cent energy dollar, income in the developing country, income rise to $2.60, growing farm demand, just employment income, and growth economy, and moreover, a majority of the poor are agricultural workers. This is Dow 2001, when the low-income countries reside in rural areas, primary agriculture made source income be directly indirect monetary components, circle by subject to primary agriculture, closely linked to foreign markets, and national level of foreign are likely to be small to poor, to benefit cities out rural household, 840 million deaths now, and 40,000 a day. This is shown at World Bank in 2008, estimates 840 million people have enough to eat. That means 1/5 of the world's population developed don't have calories, enough protein, above 40,000 people die each day to prove linked to malnutrition, and 10 billion will die by the year 2030. This is Adela 2001. Most of the world's food calories come from grain temperatures go now possible enough to feed the 10 billion people, especially 2030 melt improvement crops seem to have balanced policies they can and advantage to the Philippines. First, farm bill subsidies facilitate U.S. dumping of agriculture in the Philippines now walk-ins and Oxford 96 U.S. 60 qualified subsidies in agriculture system in its competition to destroy life and the vast scale and leave the country continues to depend on food from come forward with 16,000 subsidies around 30 times our Filipino income. USDA has been steadily cultivating the Philippines as lucrative agricultural export market, and the U.S. is responding by actually this causes of violent anti-globalization backlash. The New York Times in 03 the farmers across the Philippines discovered that the United States are also under by massive slaughters that they cannot compete agricultural on places on increasing food globalization, new pills and spare fees and non-potent anti-government insurgencies. The same saying represent towards the United States will come comments on the Islamic fundamentals things Al-Qaeda battlefield the war on terrorism continues the threat of devastating anti-globalization backlash set up by widespread resentment nor traded practice is enormous, and the U.S. responding by forward deployments of the South China Sea, Tibet, Neck, and O2. The Southern High stronghold Muslim groups joined actions the first time the U.S. suspended global war on terrorism outside of Afghanistan, which is to confront Abdul Shaif in the West America, the falls within the Philippines, first cost of Washington, Southeast Asia, Shaif, the radical arms of the Taliban, chief shipping links to use the Philippines, naval force to prevent Abdul Shaif and use of naval capabilities, island hop. This causes miscalculations, the cost of CSI since 1998. The growing suppressive housing, the accidents, miscalculations, and military forces come close contact with the disputed territory to by naval government sent to naval countries, even now superior to CBMs, they're provocated by others. They continue to commit threats. Freedom against the U.S. will certainly become involved. The U.S. Chinese governments are sponsoring these attacks. May signal of displacement could increase saber rattling force in the South China Sea. Nowhere the continuing ability when it comes to military activity to split the air springs the view that those states are capable of taking advantage of protecting wide gaps defense capability. Impact is nuclear war. This whole 2001. Miscalculation may cause China to react irrationally. China to document focus on performance, project offensive rapid strike capabilities, ideas strike first strike hard through the nuclear response place. The only place real confidence recently significant loss of South China Sea rotations fast point in East Asia control the trade of East Asia, where China has led to a dozen provocative action to destabilize the region in terms of thousands of power toward China by creating defined road. Advance 3 is trade. Sub-point 8, world trade is dead. U.S. arms leader caused the collapse of the WTO, started global war. Now it's time to unconditionally eliminate subsidies. Press of the SI in 2003. The collapse of WTO is a hot round. There's one step the president shake. The recruitment global discrimination of the U.S. Fed critical sports to public radio since the announced the U.S. is moving media and unconditionally phase out subject agricultural production and export the clubs and talk towards the whole question of future WTO global trading system and maintain regard for the world economy and relations of bilateral regional trade agreements of similar to the whole war to this world the failing Cancun. The trends likely accelerate rapidly, and the United States' refusal to eliminate farm slavery destroys marketing, forcing billions of people to live in abject poverty. The refusal of the United States to dismantle distortions of free trade is the biggest barrier to growth throughout the world. Only unilateral action solves. This New York Times No. 3. The agricultural policy of the United States is billions to lobby the commercial hardship for farmers in the double report. Agriculture made the hipster acid American free trade treaty. Marks farmers able to dump products in the world market. The grains not has the power to what's present as well as Philippines, U.S. activists and plot to pressure imperialism, world bank space, and to trade destroying farm subsidies can spend global wealth on $100 trillion and how they found people out of poverty. I used 2015 Washington material free trade and physical operation out of the poorest country, but food exporting allies in Cancun, formidable black choice, United Post, putting L2 farm subsidy been addressed negotiation or on life support, thanks to mainly perhaps since American leadership, the United States refused to give economic weapons to farm subsidy would actually boon to American farmers because the high took a large fertilization, make them winners more open competition, push good jumps on reform with sweeping your loud judges, ideal spawning, systematic wrong-headed market distortion, American astronomical society trade fictions may grow worse. It could take a collapse of the global trading system for the political bounds of power to shift from Washington to against the farm lobbies, and the farm bill undermines U.S. trade credibility at the Doha eases pressure of the subsidy abuse and threats of retaliation. Patel and who first know too. Dickless described the new bill as perfect illustration of hypocrisy, trade liberalization, the feeling WTO sanction threat, retaliation, use hypocrisy, and trade protection with the passage of the U.S. bill. The U.S. must no longer stand out, Senate Japanese retaliation, the power of the American Trading Party election, blow over the credibility of WTO's policy, WTO, the U.S. present trade oriented, wholly inconsistent with the new bill. We cannot negotiate on the basis of it, do as I say, not as I do, and the Congress must lead the world by amending farm bills and cutting subsidy. Fitzgerald, the Heritage Foundation, 03 Congress lead by Walter by the proposal, and the American West cut subsidies to the U.S. and may take lead forward, prosperity, the United States agriculture industry, pursue better price, expand choice, provide American credibility, global marketplace, and new credibility, the U.S. additional leverage needs in negotiation. Moreover, the subsidy cuts in the level of the 2002 Farm Bill crushed leadership lock in protectionist position underneath the U.S. bill to negotiate the WTO. Griswold No. 3. The Congress has raised increasing will expand use leadership and trade pressure from domestic switching and agriculture in the back of Asian financial crisis and limiting the 2004 Farm Bill with subsidies of 80% higher than 1996 law. The new Farm Bill has universally decried by our trading partners who rely charge the U.S. hypocritically preaches free trade by practicing subsidies and deal has been compromised. U.S. companies cannot expect 4 countries to agree to bear if the United States maintains a high barrier to subsidies and agricultural trade. Moreover, a multilateral negotiation will liberalize EU agriculture, which will not occur in this ASCO. This agricultural law look no 2 non-agricultural trade, avoiding liberalization, high protect agricultural markets. Trade negotiating, you find it hard to resist the collective influence of collecting seeking low-lies world agriculture. Sell point B is world war. First note that WTO rules and arbitration essential for escalation, naval trade wars, global shooting wars, new Tribune 99. The purpose of WTO is not to wage war, but to prevent architects of with the content of the PP 1930 and all the global 1930 protective forces prevent predatory international economic trade wars, better neighbor policy, health push for war, trade war to war with WTO successful post war. The United States is firmly committed to global peace for free trade songs, conflicting interests, talking instead of war, and WTO on top of the peace, help us to grave danger, biggest threat to WTO's declines for free trade with the United States, and the absent the WTO, these wars will go
nuclear coupling, new service 99, the spectrum nuclear fluid freezing all life, the planet, with active to the third nation, north Dakota, like, definitely further the possibility for all conflict of the nation's penetrating threat of world nuclear warfare, global economics, war protests, the 135 top nation peacefully discuss economic issues, life is settled, and bomb in the past, as long as nations are treating peacefully, their economies are built, exports, other countries, Beijing says, a way toward global prosperity, counter specter of nuclear war nation, are learning to live and work together, and history proves our argument is similar, and 188, which is going to cause border armies after nuclear and all economics, the Cold Trade War, escalated hot shooting wars, from non-stop wars of 1780 century, restricted trade policy with the world, British trade program, American colonists, the revolution, 19th century, trying to cite politicians, Europe began directing trade rails, hostility built up until eventually exploded into World War II, the 1930s, Hoover side deployed through all the active result, world trade coming to ground cold, the Stein world plunged into the Great Depression, turned to World War II, can we afford to allow this to happen, nuclear age for Chinese war, is the economic fallacy, national and parties, trade, sport, control, Monty devaluation, the philosophy of protection, the philosophy of war, moreover, independence makes war unfeasible, this is Griswold, the Center for Trade Policy, 98. Trade encourages people to live in peace together. Trade encourages the cross-border and nation more economic interdependent. Trade makes more profitable. One nation produce goods, other people they conquer by permanent communication. Creates a network of human countries, international critical tolerance, respect. Trade makes slow war. Let's play the vibration and cause a terrible business when goods cannot cross-border. Armies often will, and also a lack of economic interdependence replace monetary diplomacy with gunboat diplomacy. Ace crime in one country versus hostility in another country. Knows monetary but trade in other countries because how strong the other country would fight over some issue beside trade independent country better trade to test the economic growth party because they more effectively observe non-violent economic pressures and the consequences. And without sustained U.S. trade leadership, the global economy will backslide and collapse, marking war wars bursting at the Institute for International Economy. One cause the present crisis, the decline effect of U.S. leadership, global economic season, possibility makes us to leave tail for the faster the popular backers, global stage political statement, the most international economic political change still backwards and the absence of continued force that side come in the form of test side regional protected disputes across the Atlantic, key station, free trade, world market emergency, the ICS remains aside of international trade for the last 5 years to specifically meet that particularly positive impact of regional legislation, world airline possible the way between trade tax and hostility between regional blocks. He continues because of the ways on the world economy, dynamic growth, and traditional leadership over the United States most important play on the global economic system, steady erosion, U.S. position on global economic multi-level institutions, if not check this erosion, continues severe international conflicts, disintegration of global economic impact as global nuclear wars since Lewis 1998. Instead of allowing countries which often the global economy, the U.S. to neo-colonial wars, forcing countries to maintain the collapsing global economy, the U.S. wars will result in mass death, suffering, even regional nuclear wars. We may see mass death and genocide, global scale, make the pale. Deaths of World War II pale compared to the wars are so damaged the complex economic trade efforts component of material, biological, energy, source, the economy, and the ability to support their 68 billion people. Moreover, trade leadership is key to overall U.S. leadership. Hormats in 01, America's leadership in promoting trade globalization and robust global economic system, essential security benefits American people to this country's ability to maintain strong, effective leadership on global, political, and security matters for the last 20 years, and the impact of global nuclear wars closed down 1995. Under the third option, the United States seeks to retain global leadership, improve the rise of another global rival until the multipolarity and definition on the balance of the best long-term guiding principles, synergy, sufficient, desirable in itself because the world and the United States exercise leadership had tremendous advantage. First, the global environment would be more open and receptive to American values, democracy, free trade, rule of law. Second, the world had better chance of dealing cooperatively with most of the power stations, nuclear politicians, thus to region of gender, renegade states, and low-level conflicts. U.S. leadership would help preclude the rise of another hostile global rival in the United States and world to avoid another global cold hot war. All the tendencies include global nuclear states, U.S. leadership with more conducive to a global stability, the bipolar and multipolar balance of power systems.
How's it going, Henry?
Not bad. How you doing?
All right. Now, you read this piece of Cohen evidence in, it's like your second card. You have it tagged as the plan provides income to solve food security. Now, this card says, given the rural center of gravity of poverty, broad-based agricultural and rural development is essential for reducing poverty and assuring food security in developing countries. What I'm curious about is, where's your evidence that says that cutting subsidies would solve agricultural development in developing nations?
First card.
That's the first card?
First card, yeah.
That evidence says that United States continuation of agricultural subsidies causes poverty, but it doesn't give the reverse causal that banning subsidies would cause them.
The last line of the card says the way to reduce poverty and increase food security in developing countries seems to be the elimination of substantial subsidies.
Right, yeah, exactly. Seems to be. See, your evidence sort of says that the U.S. agribusinesses are doing, all these sorts of things and dumping agricultural products.
Subsidies are the single reason why agricultural liberalization.
Where's the evidence for that?
Our first piece of card, I think it's Vanilla.
No, that says trade liberalization practices. It doesn't say subsidies are the number one cause.
It does say the word subsidies in the
Okay.
evidence.
All right.
It's outstanding.
Fair enough.
Our New York Times evidence says that.
That's cool.
Okay.
Your DEBCA evidence says that the United States is already expanding forward deployment in the South China Sea and has already engaged in military cooperation with the Philippines.
Correct.
Where's the evidence that says the plan causes the U.S. to remove our fleet?
We read evidence that says the impetus for those forward deployments is because of the anti-American sentiment in those countries, and we continue.
But your evidence says that Bush has already
sentiment.
labeled them a key front in the war on terror and pledged military cooperation. Why would the plan cause them to be removed
because those
from our
terrorist
terrorist
activities
list?
are occurring in the status quo. We remove the impetus for those terrorist activities to happen.
Wait, how does that work? Aren't Abu Sayyaf already pissed off at the United States? Do you read any evidence that do you read any evidence that says the plan would cause them to forgive the United States?
The reason why Abu Sayyaf has the recruitment powers that it does is because of resentment toward United States trade
Right,
practices.
but correct
Our
me if I'm
evidence
wrong. You read no reverse causal evidence that says the plan will cause them to forgive
I
the
think
United
our
States.
evidence is quite good on the claim that the reason why people in the Philippines are going toward anti-American groups is because of farm subsidies.
Right. No, I do not dispute you have a link to your evidence. I'm just curious if you have any evidence that claims the
well,
plan would cause them to forgive the United States.
We'll contend if no people are in the group, then the group will no longer exist.
So is that a no? Okay. Your trade credibility
I
advantage.
don't really know what you want from me.
Your trade credibility advantage. What's the impact to the United States not having trade credibility?
Our evidence, well, it's twofold. First, our evidence indicates that the WTO dispute mechanism will collapse without U.S. leadership, and that in itself is
Okay, but sorry, let me rephrase my question. I'm not the end impact. Why is U.S. trade credibility good for those things?
Our Bergstein evidence is quite good. It says that without U.S. leadership, that the traditional impact of regionalization will be lost.
So U.S. trade negotiation credibility prevents regionalization?
And also, in itself, it allows for negotiations to be successful.
Multilateral WTO negotiations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Multilateral WTO negotiations good. If you prove that's bad, that's not our act.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
Devastating.
I don't know.
Was that you?
No one saw it. I'd like to first say thank you for probably some of the greatest years of my life in college debate to the entire community. I think that a lot of the support and a lot of the love I feel for this activity I couldn't have done without probably a lot of you out there. I would like to thank the Louisville debate team for hosting a CEDA Nationals. That'll be extremely memorable. Also, I would like to thank the CEDA community. The greater, I guess, the organizational capacity to put on this tournament is immense. I'm pretty messed up when it comes towards organizational ability, so it's pretty amazing to see that this thing goes off smoothly with as many teams as possible. I'd like to thank some people because I guess it seems to be like a traditional thing to do. First, I'd like to thank my parents. They're probably watching this on live feed. They've put a lot of money into this for me. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank all the coaches that have supported me in this activity for the last 4 years. Brian Lane is just amazing. I mean, there's no other way to describe the man. He is there for you whenever you need him. He knows how to run a program. Josh Ho, one of the first people who taught me what college debate was. Cody Morrow, one of the first people who taught me what high school and college debate was. Casey Kelly, who is a hoss. There's no other way to say it but that. He's one of the most amazing people I've ever met in this activity. Travis Neal, amazing. There's nothing else I can say about him, but he's been one of my best friends in this activity, one of the most amazing and influential people I've known. Justin Green, John Hines, Kenda Cunningham, these are all people who have very much influenced me. I'd like to thank a special thanks to Julian, Scotty Gopret, and Johnny Prieur, who I started with, and I'll probably end with all of them. Mike, Cade, Ben, Patrick, Max, etc., all the people that I really love in this activity. I'd like to thank you all. And with that, it's 3 off-case arguments, and then it's going to go to the third world farmers advantage, then the
That's poverty.
poverty advantage, then the trade advantage.
Wait, third world farmers is not poverty.
That's what you said.
Oh, yeah.
And then the trade advantage, and then the South China escalation advantage.
Can I come a little closer here?
Yeah, if you want. You can put this laptop over there or somewhere if you want to. You can do that right there. Is everyone ready? First off, politics North Korea, when you need this administration divided for attacking North Korea, Bush is holding off conservative pressure to attack Night Winter, and 2K4 Bush again emphasizing cooperation diplomacy in 40 Bush 8 7 working hard to risk schedule 6 party attacks on North Korea on the nuclear program. North Korea remains to be seen whether shift towards diplomacy and natural evolution. Some administration officials want to step up pressure on Iran, so we have for the change represents an mediation at least for now. The influence of new concerns who are leading advocates of the war, and you are also call for watching over the regimes of Iran as we push off before policy rise. We may divide Hawks in the Pentagon, Vice President and Vice President Cheney's office opposed engagement. Neoconservatives are pushing Bush again to war and terrorism by overthrowing the regimes in Iran, and here that's the policy pushing the new book and U.S. move to overthrow North Korea leader Kim Jong-un almost will start a catastrophic 7 world war with about 70 million people, and Bush is pursuing diplomatic engagement with Korea, but the Hawks will still convinced Bush to attack American prospect 2K4 after 2 years of alternative ignoring North Korea. The Bush administration to change course. The administration announced it was ready for the administration. Also, entirely been a regime change. The goal, for example, on the Armed Services Committee, how far off the report of the president will present yet the support security breach. Unhappy the administration makes mention some members of Congress have sought to bolster the hardline position in the farm lobby controls both parties in Washington. There's bipartisan support for the bill repealing would start a political fire. Someone Washington, the Canada Service 2K2 farming reach will also make occupation expected, but you also know the industry climb Washington farm industries influence a combination of several factors, including the role of agriculture played historically in the key position about lobbying farm states and political reality. Since 2002 election, every state also has seen farmers can buy industries that advantage. Every senator includes farmers like historic constituents, senators from the very small rural areas of the power. Some of the most effective leaders in Congress are people involved in agriculture. 6 states have all given heavy farmer subsidies. Also, some of the closest rescues and residents in Congress some determined the control and also illustrates the increasing political clout of the farm lobby, and that loss will cause Bush to turn the neoconservatives, increasing risk of pre-influx to 2K4. By seeking to strike conservative balance between the traditional neoconservatives and neoconservatives, Bush should try to mitigate the international community's backlash against the excessive use of neoconservatives as CBS foreign policy. Neoconservative tendency not likely to be affiliated from Bush stands a chance of rating his re-election bid 2K4. The difference between 1992 now is that the American electorate views the global situation become more security oriented since September 11th. The downward is found in the re-election will also tell a high likelihood this sustained influence on neoconservative schools. Sees the point of back failed diplomacy to Korea will cause a nuclear war in the Korean Peninsula. In 2K3 6 targets failed the cooperation between DP Cargill alleged nuclear program has resulted in Korean cracked power marks so great that be heard around the world. So to work on all the destroy two capital city Korean Prieur also risk of calamitous war of the great parts of possible use of weapons of mass destruction. Next off peace process is at Ace point peace process told only new round talks may provide Baltimore Sunday 2K3. Short said the United States would carry out there is no Pakistan US roadmap to peace plan right now. We have to think about the change of status quo to reach our fundamental security. Israel has been a security bear that encouraging on Palestine land also survive around Jewish settlements of land. Palestinian invasion as part of their arguments, and the peace point is linked the plan to overcharge U.S. relations by removing subsidies economies into K2. Trade between Europe and America, also traditional Turkey and Turkey and pumpkin pie, but the new source of argument likely to be more porous than the monstrous farm bill. Also will undermine the hopes of liberalizing farm trade. The 2002 farm bill. Those all this when American subsidies more farm may also reach 3 to 4 times European levels. More subsidies agriculture and force American recalcitrant trading parties to negotiate available. But this analogy is unrealistic. If SNC point strong U.S. relations are key to the peace process. And 2 K3 how can the United States and Europe also many of these people who provide conference approach the Middle East possible actively cultivating cooperation and cooperating security. List about change that face to general Middle East. They can also take voluntary approach culturally adjusting the regional key problems for Europeans want a stronger Europe to cooperate now compensate with the United States more united European position agenda led to more balanced and cooperative European sense to increase coordination on the Iran peace process demonstrate the United States more likely to come to agreement with the world so the united cooperative Europe then with a deeply divided resentful in the peace process caused nuclear war bears 1997 the Middle East peace process also risk of regional nuclear war creation of Palestine same more likely to encourage both war and terrorism and expanding laws good escalation Palestine also spawn the use of exchange of nuclear weapons Israel about the loss of opportunity will also compel bringing to bomb but Israel would also move to form of explicit nuclear declaration counterpoint. The United States Congress should require the eligibility for nearly all overall agricultural subsidies in Titles 1, 2, 3, 5, and 10 of the Farm Security Rule and Investment Act be dependent upon the implementation of carbon sequestration programs as outlined by the Conservation Reserve Program. Reservation was competition permutations won't get anywhere. The plan removes the funding authorization for subsidy, increases the counterplan, changes the way that increase in funding are implemented. The counterplan is mutually exclusive with the plan, and it is observation 2 is that observation 1 is competition is mutually exclusive. After since all those subsidies, observation 2 is net benefits, climate adaptation, ASA point sequestration funding is critical to allow time for technology advance to deal with global warming. These Washington Post 2K2 for farmers shark to live with corn soybeans, new cash crop, maybe horizon and carbon also provide extra income for farmers and significant environmental benefits. $50 million project also be earned by 10 universities. This has a goal of encouraging farmers to use methods including no-till farming that keep carbon in this world widespread carbon sequestration, where the farmers can reduce the expected increase in carbon monoxide emissions by 20 years by 20% per year. Leaders of the project all for immediate farmers may also benefit from government incentives or carbon sequestration practices. Carbon sequestration has been discussed in one of the conservation credit offers for the recent farm bill. We're also looking for 44 from 75 million to 200 million metric tons of carbon that can be sequestered each year. This is one to solve all the greenhouse gases, but also stop gap increasing emissions for 30 to 40 years until better technologies come out. The impact not dampening climate change, trends of survival civilization. Gale say 19 some the consequence planetary warming even worth intensifying a cascade of environmental effect that all shake out civilization was foundational to get the catalog of anticipated factories like biblical apocalypse on tissues. The consequence will include not only more and extreme temperatures will also increase more rain and snowstorms, destructive hurricanes and productive crop destroying land nations. Also, everyone might disappear under these ecological shift which outbreaks of infection. You see the feedback global warming also feed more nightmares to disease, intensify the speed of the warming for more higher temperature reach and wildfires that also burn another forest vegetation observe carbon dioxide the burning wood accelerate the accumulation of greenhouse gases leading into more warming driven climate destabilization. This is going to put the global climate into an epoch of wild trade. Or sorry, the third one. None of their evidence is reverse causal about rescission of farm subsidies crossed by all these arguments with the advantage that takes out the ability for them to when internal link in the plan one level the playing field. European subsidies are huge and they want to reciprocate. How can CEDA through the EU farm subsidies are world's largest and trade distorting and also come to trade barriers faced with the deep splits by the members of EU reform commissions resorted to the insurgents and division tactics. Economists turn pesticides. ASA point farmers in developing countries overuse pesticides causing multiple health problems. Irish news CEDA developing farmers all poisoned by pesticides. Money they're banned by regulation, dangerous chemicals all contribute to public health disaster. Public health pesticides are often linked to cancer, immunological study that beats up on these cause environmental collapse and mass cancer deaths in health. Media group into poisoning farmers in developing world crop saving also developing countries from eradicating workers and risk of concentration of cancer. In 2001, there were 300,000 cases of poisoning, 5,000 deaths, and third argument limiting subsidies will massively displace farmers in developing countries who can't compete. Tariffs can't check back effects of subsidies. Wires and to get the gains from market access have been increasing exaggerated. What a low middle income actually get? What about countries with $500 per person would also have by 2050 $500 by also worse as opposed to $500 if nothing was done at all. These low countries that subsidize food to place economic share that low countries need the cheap food to feed their people. And the ideal level of playing field. This is wrong. Mexican farmers tens of millions of farmers will be wiped out and there's no difference even if you limit all subsidies between a subsidy and increase in agriculture. This placement you have is potentially enormous and Ruben Act subsidies also
only helps local bourgeois in the third world multinational exploitation. The equivalent of state we should liberate by placing the profits in the slave population. The plot and to get through their call for cutting out subsidies in the name of their own market is poorly followed. They're all with the traditional neoliberal capitalists. The export agriculture also benefit from the illumination of first world ag subsidies are more the corporations which are other by third world oligarchies multinational campaigns about one agricultural subsidies limited. They want economic and political injustices continued. Fourth argument alternative causalities. They support instead Ross and two in 1999 external that is number one obstacle social service broad based development every third world for reason the governments are capitalists also served by an unsustainable balance placed on debt service. Support domestic turmoil. This Parker 2 Clark critics also argue that countries undercuts the developing country returns their retards economic growth. The place where poverty in the developing world cannot be placed where other nations or subsidies alone. Next argument is the point is that the plan diverse attention from some of these critical problems maker to get well many agricultural subsidies are important argues that the impacts of enormous policy makers and focus that energies on issues that peripheral economic development normal important issue the total investment gain to low income middle countries with a range are passed by African countries with annual $500 per person would have more than 5,003 and increases are small in their food security. This is summer to get through despite the new programs USA articulates of only marginally more than subsidies 1990 to 2001 and fifth argument is turn removal of US subsidies on balance damaging developing countries well-being reports can see that economic benefits sure they invest a lot of money helps their world economies maker to get would result in little additional income from exporting countries according to the World Bank estimated country in sub-Saharan Africa also under present trade agreements have a per capita income of $500 per income in 20,000 which also have a per capita income of $503. 6 is organic farming is turn organic farming is some of the developing countries are shifting to organic farming because they are unable to compete in status quo as new scientists to get to organic farming is increasingly feeding the poor world and the poor world that the myth is also what organic farming means low yields in the developing world does not apply especially among poor farmers who can't yield mass amounts of fertilizer and pesticide to raise equal beast output. This is key to food security economic attempts in 2K3000 farmers are also through organic agriculture helping achieve food security and also simultaneously increase biodiversity. Organic farming also fast reliance on maximize the natural resources in the sustainable way. Some arguments turn banning subsidies which cost small farmers. Next advantage?
Yeah.
Next advantage. They have read a disadd to the plan and net benefit of the counterplan. A point uniqueness. The U.S. is still little. The U.S. has little trade negotiation credibility and garner trade concession. The status quo. That's the first card they read as uniqueness to their advantage. B point is the link. The plan increases American trade negotiation credibility, and this allows the agenda international trade discussion. This is also their first uniqueness card. And the advantage. C point the internal link. The United States trade agenda is not multilateral free trade based on WTO, but rather bilateral and regional preferential trade agreements. They will use the credibility garnered by the plan to secure these deals, which actually advocate global free trade. The Lahari in 3. American negotiations said the United States are also going to be WTO members. Part of the future United States way to also move toward free trade. But they can't do countries. So looks message is clear. Pesky would countries also multilateral WTO. Liberalization of the waste of the United States instead spearhead push for the free trade through bilateral regional agreements. See point the impacts they the impacts for us. All other admins of free trade enormous assumes multilateral free trade negotiations. Free trade is crucial to solve the terrorist attacks. Impact to extinction to solve inevitable war. Next argument is that no risk of WTO collapse developed in developing countries are all aware of their economic dependence on each country. Even if friction continues, there's zero reason war was also a result of multilateralism. Would be in a second argument on multiple issues. Block WTO negotiation developing despite developing nations commitment to multilateral trading system Belmark and to get through Group 77 China. Also, there's an alternative multilateralism non-discriminatory trading system program growth. He said that requires a complete review. Anti-dumping practices. The standard 5 sustainable trade related IPRS market access to expedited negotiations, agriculture and textiles and clothing, and noteworthy uniqueness to the advantage the U.S. is already pushing bilateral regional trade agreements to leverage into scratch that card. And in percolate trade disputes not escalating trade war show back in 1903 after second agricultural disputes late in 1960 agricultural tariffs remained high key balance in east so chicken war disputes and since agricultural trade war continued 1972 Turkey war agricultural trade was separate negotiation top of the Turkey red failed to make progress in 1970 the cat poison parties concluded international communal agreements for the daily power and beef and protectionist power between the United States and U.S. inevitable has completely unrelated to GMOs larger to get the European also unit has also one authorization to impose a restriction on U.S. imports of several species but for the biggest is the American foreign sales SD tax base for U.S.-based corporations and China. First argument is U.S. naval deployment to deter Chinese attack. This is Walter in 2000. Some Americans consider that China may argue that with the Chinese actively pursuing hegemony, most states in Asia are turn the United States accountable on China's rise to increase the likelihood that at some point the ambitions will collide with China. And the next argument is that overwhelming conventional support to deter Chinese attack. This is Ross in 2002. Chinese military leaders believe the United States possesses far superior warfighting capabilities. Also believe the United States can high cost for Chinese to fund the conventional support of the United States and enhance the U.S. credibility arguments. And even if deterrence failed, the U.S. would kick their ass. This is Ross. And even if the deterrence fails, the United States can also still achieve its objective through the victory on the battlefield. Conventional deterrence therefore was only not effective at achieving and enhancing the credibility of subsequent U.S. deterrence designation. Not submit the U.S. demands Washington use conventional force carry out assured destruction.
What was the last argument?
If we went to war, it wouldn't escalate. The United States would beat them down.
What's the status of the counterplan?
It's dispositional.
Okay. What's your definition of dispositionality?
If you prove why the counterplan is not competitive, we have the right to jettison it. If you straight turn the counterplan, e.g. make solvency deficit arguments to the counterplan or straight turn the net benefit, or the DA.
Which is with it. Cool.
Yeah.
What does the counterplan do? It excludes Title II.
Johnny, you want to handle this?
Can I answer this? No. The counterplan issues an eligibility requirement which says that all the subsidies are given, require that they're given to conservation programs as contained in the, I think it's Conservation Reserve Program in Article 2.
So
Conservation
do you not
Reserve
rescind those subsidies?
No, we give them to conservation programs.
Okay, so you rescind all other subsidies and give them to conservation programs?
No. We do not rescind the subsidies. The amount of money that the United States spends on subsidies continues.
Okay, so the only thing you do then is rescind or is then maintain conservation programs.
Right. It establishes an
What's
eligibility.
the difference? What is the difference between that and the status quo? I guess.
Well, in the status quo, we fund all these sorts of different things. In the
Subsidies.
counter plan, we fund conservation.
So you no longer fund things like soybean, corn.
Yeah,
et
well,
cetera.
yes.
Does
United
the counter plan solve the case?
Yes, it solves the
So
case.
you do rescind all other subsidies but conservation.
No, we do not rescind those subsidies
How does it solve the case?
because it changes the eligibility requirements to require that the subsidies are given based on conservation.
Explain to me how that solves the case.
Well,
Per
which
se.
which advantage would you like to know why we solve?
It doesn't cut subsidies. It just changes the eligibility.
It changes the requirements for getting the subsidies to conservation. Implementing of conservation.
Okay,
programs.
so then all farms must implement these conservation programs before.
Correct.
So then it doesn't solve.
No,
Okay.
it does solve the case because the same sorts of
Sure, let's
subsidies
talk
are not
about your
given out.
politics, DA. You read internal link evidence talking about the GOP hawks being divided.
Yeah.
Then you read link evidence about how GOP or politicians in farm states such as Ohio, Indiana, and wherever we are now. Do you read evidence that says the hawks such as Cheney give a crap about the farm bill?
I think Cheney's pretty much in chains with the farm lobby. I think Cheney's a lot of his like budget comes from the farm lobby.
your
These are like
evidence is talking
Midwest
about-
states that are
Hold on a second. Your
hardcore
evidence is talking
conservatives
about
that Cheney
Trump's,
probably sucks into.
The war cabinet. Do you have any evidence that says the
Dude, the war cabinet is in bed with the breadbasket of America. I mean, this is talking about like Baptist Mid-America. The Baptist Mid-Americans are
Baptist Mid-America-
are the neocons,
Okay,
man.
what will your response be to a uniqueness claim that there are other things pissing off the GOP?
I mean, we'll make those arguments in 2-inch. I don't think I have to disclose those arguments yet.
Sure, but there are other things that piss off the GOP constantly. Why is the farm bill, or what is your...
The farm bill's probably okay. Go ahead, John, if you want to answer that.
No, you can answer.
The Farm Bill is probably the largest thing that has an impact in the U.S. Congress. I mean, our lobby evidence is amazing about the influence it has when it comes towards political campaigns, the ability for it to set agendas, etc. Was that time? Yeah, you said. No, I thought you said not to because.
Everything's it doesn't rescind subsidies. It changes eligibility requirements for subsidies. Conservation programs, which means that all farms must
Here, I got it.
now,
I got it.
all farms must now implement form conservation before they get it.
Hey, Mike, are you speaking from the podium? Are you speaking from the podium?
I'm not speaking down here.
We should. That's some shady shit, man. I don't care, man. That's some shady shit, man.
You gonna sit over there? No.
I'll just keep your stuff. These are your expenditures. Alright. Where's peace process? It's over here.
I don't know about the farther Russell table, dude.
Yeah, there's some shade in this right there, dude.
Alright.
Exactly. Case in point.
What's that? He's got a backflip on me though, so I need that.
I'll take it.
Thanks. I mean, you already, I guess you're not using my paper, so I can't really blackmail you into doing that.
You didn't bring enough marbles, did you? Either? Alright. That's true. That's true.
Okay. I would also like to take this opportunity to just thank a few people before I get started. First, I'd just really like to thank the Louisville debate team and CEDA for hosting this humongous tournament and for making it run really smoothly. I've had a fantastic time, and I always really like coming to CEDA because I feel like it's a little bit more laid back. And it's just a more laid back atmosphere than other tournaments, especially like the NDT, where I just feel totally stressed out the whole time and I don't really enjoy myself. So it's been a really great experience. And then I just really have to thank everyone on the Emory debate team, both for their work outside of this tournament, and then also just for coming together and really supporting me and Henry in preparation for our elimination rounds, and especially to Bob and Greenstein for really just doing something really kind for us and helping us get to this point, and also to Stephen and Cyrus for also letting us advance over them. That was really noble of them. I also need to thank the coaches that are here, at least. I'd like to thank James Rowland for just his warm heart and for always having a smile for me every time I see him. It really just makes me feel good. I'm always happy to see James every time I see him. D. Height, just for being awesome, for writing great strategies. I've won so many debate rounds pretty much solely because of him and because of his coaching. So I owe a lot of that to him. To Melissa for letting me debate how I wanted to debate, letting me participate in this activity at the level that I wanted to, instead of forcing me to go one way or the other. That really meant a lot to me. And to Ricky, who is a new acquisition. I didn't really know him that well until this year, but he's just been a great coach and a great friend. He's always been so willing to help out, and he's been really responsible. And last, I'd like to thank Henry for putting up with me for the last 4 years. I haven't debated a single college round without Henry, and I'm kind of happy about that because I really enjoy debating with him. So, yeah, thanks. All right, so 2AC. It's going to be politics, then the trade advantage, then poverty, then the Philippines, the peace process, CA, and then counterflow.
Hey, where are you going to put your evidence?
I'll put it right here.
On timer.
I got one.
Hold on a second here.
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know where we got these. All right. One, there's no link. There are link evidence streams Republicans and farm states where their impact evidence streams hawks within the Bush administration. Also, Bush won't put the plan. He's never advocated the elimination of farm subsidies. No reason to expect political capital plan. Annual slice of controversy. National review in 2009. Line plus ability to win. Super like deeper political and safe calculation. Police slides open conflict and the plan. The fiat is a bomb. Normal means stock is predicted. It's the most predictable congressional document when it came when the plan will be passed. No means prevents Astro spiking. I just said so. Our interpretation debate is best. Also, big farm lawyers support cutting subsidies. New York Times in 2003. Big farm users were encouraged saying that the agreements to reduce subsidies would eventually benefit American farmers and subsidies. The supports for opening for corn and Bush's loss is based for 5 reasons. Novak in 2004. Republicans on either side of Pennsylvania seem to go in opposite directions over the size of the highway bill. Prohibition of runaway spending tax cuts. Lose Republicans in perplexing efforts to keep 9 levels of investigation from campaign season. Also, immigration and economy have killed the basis from EPI. In 2004, comments on the Bush administration advisors the terms of Bush administration immigration is hard poked massive little increase. Also, GOP fiscal policies and discipline. They're a matter of fiscal discipline. Analysis from South Bend Tribune in 2004. Bush's political advisors have been preaching the need to energize the conservative base expansion of Medicare and other fiscal spending. Also, Iraq intervention makes North Korean weapons deployment inevitable in the status quo. This from BBC in 2004. The Iraq and North Korean army for utilized to safeguard the country, deterrent force, we even more reinforce the country and deter in every way. Also, Bush will never attack North Korea. North Korea will never lead solid negotiations after the election. Shapiro in 2004. The United States not one of the conflict given the cost of Afghanistan. The Bush administration stated repeatedly that has no intention to use the force that would be prepared to use mutual assurances. Also, Bush is already attempting to destroy negotiations now. New York Times in 2004. Administration is going to use talks to convince other participants that North Korea is not interested in developing solutions. Some of that have already begun to slow and increase paces in North Korea. Also, U.S. weapons modernization strengthens North Korean hardliners now. Washington Post in 2004.
Don't read that. No, we read it. Turn.
And also, North Korea will back down. No risk of escalation. Bishka in 97. North Korean military has never gone before in the culture of success. North Korea has always backed down just before it's escalated, and no one has incentive to support the North in preventing escalations. From Ellen in 99. The U.S. tends to overstate the threats no longer exists. Back to surrogates of some regional conflicts. The peninsula will begin and contain within the Soviet Union. Now, the trade advantage on the top. They dropped our leadership advantage. Our evidence indicates that trade leadership is critical to overall leadership, and our impact is caused out, which is nuclear wars all over the globe, which also solves back all their disadvantages. Since we keep the lid on global conflicts. Now, the first time he says that we read a diss out, we're not fucking stupid. We've been running this since Georgia State, and our evidence indicates that it doesn't matter if we increase protections in the long term as long as we stay the WTO, because they can make those protect every day, can prevent those trade wars from escalating global shooting wars. Also, our evidence indicates that agricultural subsidies are the major impediment to global free trade talks. Also, our evidence assumes the status quo of the United States is not removing its agricultural subsidies. Now, the next year, says there's no collapse, and there's multiple other issues. Why evidence indicates agricultural subsidies are the issues. Our New York Times and press evidence indicate that agricultural subsidies are uniquely market destroying. That's proved by Cancun, where half the world literally walked out of those trade talks because of agricultural subsidies, and they will collapse free trade and destroy the WTO and destroy U.S. negotiating credibility, which will lead to inevitable wars. Like Libby says, it doesn't escalate, but it exceeds our code news service evidence that indicates that trade wars will inevitably escalate to global shooting wars with nuclear weapons. Also, our Miller evidence indicates that all of the wars the last 300 years have been caused by a lack of free trade. The last argument says that there's protections because the GMOs. Our evidence indicates that ag is critical, and the WTO solves even if it leads to more protections in the future. Poverty. The one when he says that it's not a revolution, but he says that it's not reverse causal, but it's obviously reverse causal. Ag subsidies are causing people to starve. That removal of those ag subsidies will make it so those people don't starve. He says there's no internal link in that EU, but our agricultural outlook evidence indicates that the EU will reduce the subsidies if the United States acts first. He says pesticides, but we decrease pesticides. The reason why other countries have to use pesticides because they can't compete with the United States without using those pesticides because of agricultural subsidies. If we remove those, and there's no reason why they have to use this. There's multiple alternate causalities that their evidence talks about. Things like lack of regulations in these countries that lead to pesticide use, and their evidence is just a script of the status quo, and also their impact is uniquely small. And there's no reason why we'd increase the number of cancer deaths. He says that it hurts development, but they don't need subsidies when the United States removes its own subsidies. That's also answered on the number one with our Diao and Diaz evidence that indicates agricultural subsidies uniquely collapse world food prices. The next two arguments, he says that it only helps bourgeoisie, and he reads multiple alternate causalities, but our evidence indicates that the majority of poor are agricultural workers, and so that means the plan will lead to sustainable development because we'd increase their income 2.5 times, which allows them access to things like healthcare and other types of things, so they don't have to be dependent on aid and they can be more dependent on trade. He says that they increase small farmers and that it helps developing economies, where evidence indicates that $82 billion in the farm subsidies have destroyed these developing countries. He says organic farming, but first is that the organic farming causes soil erosion and extinction. This is from Avery. In 97, the farm would also be more soil erosion. The biggest single threats of erosion would be both because of organic farmers, lower yields because of refusals to use herbicides and mainstream farmers to control the weeds, and also it sparks widespread famine from independent. In 99, organic food will feed the world. Chris Farr Harkins, chairman of one of the agricultural systems in the organic farm world, would mean instant world famine. Also, it leads to price spikes, which will lead to more famines from Cooney. In 99, famines in the area wide phenomenon during famines, the local markets and supply food because of a substantial number of population can afford. And here's more evidence from Englewood. 99, organic farmers and vegetables often built up to the double price the highs of equivalently grown vegetables in return to sustainable. Now the Philippines managed the 1C1 and TV says that deployment solves now that they'll deter attack. What evidence indicates that, well, first of all, we solve for hegemony by increasing our U.S. trade leadership, so we solve and keep the deployments around the globe. But our evidence indicates that in the South China Sea it's uniquely bad because of the war on terrorism, because it's a unique hotspot. Our evidence indicates that China will preemptively strike the United States if we do it. He says that it's not going to escalate, but it doesn't assume the scenario where China freaks out because of miscalculation and preemptively strikes the United States, which leads to short-term nuclear wars with China and the United States in the short term. Now, the peace prospects. First is that we don't increase U.S.-EU relations. They like agricultural subsidies, and our agricultural outlooks evidence indicates they'd be pressured once the United States act, which means our plan doesn't necessarily increase relations. Also, there's no spillover between the agricultural subsidy issue and the issues on the peace process. Although there's multiple alternate causalities or impact. Their evidence talks about the U.S. roadmap and specific barriers that Israel setting up that would impede the peace process, and there's no way our plan would have an effect on those. Also, there's no internal link that their evidence says an agreement with Europe makes. No, there is no internal link. Their evidence says agreement with Europe makes things better with Europe, not in the peace process. Also, the disputes over also unilateralism on trade and arms control, climate change, IC is killing relations. Al Talbot in 2002, exercise American powers become a cause of resentment. The United States unilateralism is growing following intensity. Also, China, the thinning context proof relations are sustainable. Whitefield in 97 years, European relations are headed for the cultural split. Primary conflicts have recently been thinning. Relations is moving to one off the radar screen. Also, relations are critical to stop terrorism. Gordon in 2003, United States still plays in its European Union. Even powerful America will lead Europe's political support, military-based cooperation, international organizations, and terrorism causes extinction. Alexander in 2003, last week's brutal suicide bombs back in Jerusalem. Once again, illustrated dramatically, the international community has failed us to understand the magnitude implications of the very survival of civilization itself, and also the relations of key to the economy. Bergstein in 99. Transatlantic cooperation, independence, and joint responsibility, global leadership, like rapidly with economic superpowers, Europe and America, and the other need to devise new strategies to range to manage both while our economic relations, global economic issues will be crucial for the economy in the years ahead. Now, counterpoint. First, they solve another case, they don't eliminate subsidies. That means it's still market destroying, which destroys people in the developing world. Also, it destroys U.S. trade leadership. Also, subsidy picks are uniquely bad by nation. The phrase nearly all proves that topic can be wanted to exclude those counterplans. It also destroys our predictability, and they can't generate offense. We can't generate offense because they can run this counterplan as a dissent, and the counterplan artificially places the value of their crappy dissent, so they shouldn't be able to run it. Also, and that's about nation. Also, dispo is bad. It's time and strategies go over on Suez. The argument choice allows them to run increasingly abusive strategies, which destroy the 1 year preparation. That's about issue. Also, the current trend of increased CO2 levels is critical to stabilizing climate, which will kill everything on Earth. And so, in 2001, the creation of ice crystals never reached the atmosphere, which tremendous cooling power of the planet would take only a small amount of them to dramatically raise the planet's albedo. The next planet to rendezvous, which so supply of superradiation. In the process, attempts to outweigh this turn are laughable and pathetic. This from Felix in 2000. There was massive extinction global, and 75% of all species were limited. Simultaneously exploded every nuclear weapon in existence in every country on Earth. We would not begin to match the devastation caused by an ice age. Also, time frames perilously short. This from Mooster. In 2000, the Earth is normally much colder than it is now. Our near glacial gets gone from 10,000 years. We should be grateful that the Indian summer to which we live. This warm period has been accumulation. This the next ice age will see a third root to the planet. Mass extinctions also warm prevents massive temperature oscillations and stabilizes the thermal and circulation, reducing the risk of catastrophic cooling. And so, in 2002, essentially all the rapid warmings associated slower cooling were characteristic of less glaciation as opposed to whole economic stability of the thermal is critical additional warmth. We actually provided insurance policy against radical overtakes with teachers, as abrupt climate changes that accompany them. Also, current levels of food staples won't keep up with increasing CO2 is necessary to avoid a global food shortage from ITO. In 2001, we hope averting food global food is destined to occur in the future world. He ever gets his way the more CO2 to reduce the planet transmission would simultaneously enhancing plants photosynthesis and the Earth's
of vegetation, produce considerably more food per acre. Thousands of laboratory field experiments have verified that this is beyond circular doubt and the impacts of extinction. And so, in 2001, the ongoing rise in the CO2 content will only prove the salvation of the planet. The exposure of nearly all animal life CO2 is in the air. The more food there is of the laboratory experiments have clearly demonstrated also warm temperatures and empirically checking agricultural labs CO2 prevents global starvation. And so, in 2001, all the European science carries were the story incorrect in this particular is inconsistent with the article. The economy is just opposite of what's predicted. Is more likely to be true, and also adaptation checks impacts of oscillation and runaway warming. And so, in 2000, the record of last 2,000 years, the ringing elements of the with just the opposite attention to older periods, and for this experience much more numerous and severe floods and droughts. There will still be no impetus for plants to check the cleaner environments and water than they are currently, and also will adapt to current warming. Only risk of temperature, risk of rise benefits from Singer in 98. Even if warm were to materialize, this consequence would be largely aligned for other climate parameters, sea level change in agricultural preserve. The European Course practice now regrets policy of conservation and energy efficiency. Toronto's atmospheres and levels demonstrate also warming solves regional oscillations will stabilize climate cycles. In 90, the regional climate changes have occurred or will occur when the plan where responds to changes in local temperature variability seasons. And between years, the similarly inclined conclusion the plan will be more predictable than actually was before. Also, empirically, now we ravage habitats and species. Now this from him. In 2000, humanity discovered destroying habitats that are species rich. About 2/3 of the species occur on the top of these forests, originally covered about 14 million square acres of the planet. Also, warming is critical tropical biodiversity and it won't have any lasting effects on Arctic species. From Avery in 99, likely have higher temperatures will be likely to directly demonstrate the tropical forces. Global warming bodies will bodes very well for the world's biodiversity. Arctic has already survived major temperature changes without shrinking. Average acre worldwide temperatures especially reform the winter. Also, soil loss. The ASA point CO2 stabilizes soil loss. And so, in 9 benefits of CO2, and the most obvious is stabilize effect of enhanced plant cover. The world's valuable process with billions of tons of this most important resource. The loss of the ravages of winter water. The plant grows even more vigorously with the CO2. Both these types of erosion we see reduced. Soil aggregation is important for preventing soil loss through erosion. The Peace Point soil is key to ecosystem stability. That flips your arguments on its head. This from ITSO in 99. The intimate relationships among plants and symbiotic soil function also have varied as they are complex and vital. Nearly all responsive coexist systems of expression may also be largely dependent on that, and also SASCO efforts will prevent disease. This is from ITSO in 2000. Given adequate funding and technology above all, commitment to the campaign to roll back malaria spearheaded by the World Health Organization will have to deaths related by malaria by 2010, 2015. Map of malaria distribution bears low resemblance to one job by Rogers and Randolph, and also distribution of tech and economies are the problem. Not warmer climates, no risk of diseases. More 98. The world suffered 6 cholera pandemic. The solution was simple filtration and chlorine. The chlorination of water will not reduce the effectiveness of the water proliferation measures.
Do you have any questions, John? No. Who is ITSO?
He's a scientist.
Who does he work for? Or better question, who funds his work?
Well, I know you're going to say the oil companies. Do we have
Yeah,
evidence to
Exxon,
dispute that?
$250,000 every year given to the ITSO family. Do you have any evidence that indicates that ITSO studies
We'll
aren't
read
brought
it.
off?
If you make that argument in the block, we have evidence that indicates that he's qualified.
So let's get it. You read one
Where is it coming from?
non-ITSO card in the 2AC, right? You read one piece of Singer evidence. All the other cards are ITSO, right? I'm pretty sure.
I'm not sure if that's true.
I'm pretty sure that all the other cards are. Do you have a question really quickly?
No.
Sorry. All right. Next question. Does your adaptation evidence assume rapid warming or rapid oscillation?
Not rapid to the extent that would happen if there were like positive feedbacks, but our evidence indicates that warming would not cause these type of positive feedbacks, and that adaptation would be able to happen.
Sure. Does any of this evidence assume what our internal link to the counterplan assumes, which is 250 billion metric tons of carbon released into the environment?
Our evidence says that oscillations from that won't happen, and that warming actually stabilizes climate
Does your
changes.
evidence speak to the massive amount of discharge that comes about as a result of a huge carbon sink that will throw a lot of carbon in the air?
Yeah, our evidence speaks to. It takes into account positive feedbacks, if that's what you're asking. Yeah.
Okay. How do your Ice Age arguments work?
Our evidence indicates that just the way that trends work with the Earth, that we are due for an ice age within the next 50 to 75 years, and that yes, we are warming now because of fossil fuels, but we need that to offset the ice age. Otherwise,
Now, how does the Ice Age cycle in theory work?
How does it work? I can't really give you a scientific explanation. Our evidence cites scientific studies that indicate that every thousands of years that there is a global cooling cycle that results in an ice age.
Does your species, the warming doesn't affect species, assume a world in which there would be a 6 to 9 degree temperature oscillation in 5 years?
I think our evidence does. It says that they could adapt, but like I said before,
all your
these
evidence is that they could
feedbacks
adapt in the long
Our
term.
evidence indicates that warming prevents rapid increases.
Sure, but do you read a piece of
so
evidence
this is
that
irrelevant.
do you read a piece of evidence that tries or attempts to differentiate between slow warming or rapid warming?
Yeah, our evidence takes that into account. It says first that fast warming won't happen.
All right,
and
how
second,
does
that even if
CO2
it did, that species could adapt.
How does CO2 solve soil erosion problems in a world in which farmers are still using non-conservation
Our evidence
programs?
actually says that it increases the photosynthetic process, and so it
How does
increases.
Hey, how does warming solve oscillations?
Our evidence says that it just prevents changes in the temperature. I'm not
you
exactly.
got some
I don't
notes?
know the scientific explanation. I honestly don't know. The
So you
science
read
behind
3
it.
minutes
So
of
I know
warming
the
cards
scientific
without
studies
that.
that
All right.
says that warming it creates a general warming trend rather than
Your argument that
switchbacks.
sorry, I'm going to go to another advantage now. Your arguments on the poverty advantage that says that this would increase third world farmers' incomes by 2.5 times.
Yep.
Does any of your evidence come close to making the claims in the warrants that our Baker evidence in the 1AC makes, or the 1NC makes, which says that in the next 15 years, if the U.S. were to remove all subsidies, all this would do would literally give $2 more every year
Right, well,
to
I think
third
the
world
people that write
farmers?
your evidence don't know how to do math. Our evidence indicates that because we increased subsidies over 200% in the 2002 Farm Bill, that it massively destroys and collapses world food prices. And
Sweet.
so removing those subsidies would increase it 2.5 times.
Thank you.
Just do the math.
Here. Hold on. Oh, it's in my pocket. How's everyone doing? All right. I'd first like to echo Nirav's sentiment, thanking a couple people. First, the, sort of tournament staff. We really appreciate everything everyone's done, University of Louisville, for hosting a tournament, the ability for us to come here and debate. It's been a totally awesome tournament. It's been really fun. The CEDA staff, for the community at large, everyone, our friends, comrades. It wouldn't be anything without you all. And, D3, right? Third. Or second. Second, my parents and my family. They're watching on internet right now. They've been incredibly supportive to me throughout my whole debate career. They've, basically gone bankrupt in high school while I was in high school to send me to debate camp, fly me to tournaments, put me up, all those different sorts of things. They've been incredible. I would also like to thank all of our coaches. I can just say, UNT has phenomenal coaching. Brian Lane, like Nirav said, is just an amazing director. He's totally transformed the program. He's a friend, a mentor. Travis Neal, who is by far one of my favorite people. He's been here for the past 4 years. For us, he decided to extend his term here, so he could be with us till, we're done. And that really means a lot to us. And he's been, just phenomenal throughout. Cody Morrow, who's been one of my longtime friends. He's a great debate coach. He's been a wonderful addition to our program this year. And Casey Kelly, who's been just outstanding. I mean, this guy does more work than like 2 of our teams combined. And he's also just a great friend, and he's a totally sweet dude. Some past coaches, like Nirav mentioned, Justin Green, Josh Ho, John Hines, Jason Sykes, have all been just absolutely instrumental in our development as a debate, and also just our approach to the activity. Our team, Julian, Max, Mike G, Ben, Cade, Patrick, we wouldn't have been able to do this without you. You're our teammates, you're our friends, and you just put forth an amazing effort, and thank you all. And finally, Nirav, teammate, partner, best friend, what can I say? 4 years, PP. All right. Politics, peace process, overview, counterplan, trade. Hey, can I make a request? I'm probably going to read a shitload of cards. Can you try and keep them in order?
Try to keep them in order. I'll keep them in order so I'll give them
Just
Henry.
do your best. Do your best. Honest commitment's important, Beckley.
All right.
Can I
All
throw
right.
away this politics, please?
Politics, peace process, overview. Overview's not really very long, but overview, counterplan, trade.
Cool. So, Pete.
Ready? Politics not going for what consider twisted more than there's no way to the Hawks, and there's also next out there internally because the Hawks not want the plan either. They're just about the broad about the broad Congress, which means they can there's no 22 the turn. Also, could see the two Bush not push plan, which means there's no credit for Bush, which means they cannot solve. Also, they cannot solve the turn because they cannot convince the Hawks that North Korea is not a threat, which means at best they can only avoid a concerted backlash, not solve for internally. We also can see that Bush will never attack as well as the situation will never escalate, which means there's no internally to the turn. Peace process. Will they not going for another extended tweets and one that will not spill over as well as there are multiple alternate causalities, which means you're not sure of the source for the peace process. Politics or counterplan. Our counterplan changes the way the U.S. Department of Agriculture gives farmers by issuing eligibility requirements, stating the 2 farm bill subsidies currently contained in the Articles 1, 2, 3, 5, and 10 will only be given to support carbon sequestration efforts as outlined by the Conservation and Reserve Program in Article 2. The programs of the counterplan funds are carbon sequestration efforts to govern programs to increase the absorption of carbon throughout the changes to mechanisms and the carbon trapping techniques of trapping carbon into the soil to reduce excess amounts of washing times of entities forms of carbon sequestration techniques are vital to allow global adaptation, climate change, and sequestration traps carbon dioxide. One of the prime greenhouse gases the counterplan locks up atmospheric CO2 emissions from the adaptation is critical to want to see also evidence against how current warming causes extinction, cascade environmental effects, increased rains and floods, as well as rising sea levels that will swallow up whole island nations, as well as extending tropical zones, meaning a major return to disease and conflict that erupts the states fight over resources. Line by line. They say we don't solve because subsidies group at the first argument, or this was the answer to understand the reauthorization process of counterplan. Currently, farmers receive money to grow obscene amounts of cotton, corn, rice, and other commodities. These products are heavily traded and exported nationally. Other countries are upset. This is unfair to market intervention. While the funding for these programs remains under the counterplan, farmers do not receive money for those farming commodities. After the counterplan, it becomes more cost-effective for farmers to stop farming cotton and begin carbon sequestration practices which make their current technologies obsolete and current farming practice fiscally irrelevant. The counterplan literally creates financial incentives for farmers to keep fields fallow and to receive money. They have to buy technologies which place them at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis other countries' farmers. Farmers in other countries would love this, and it would help them compete. They also all the internally to their advantages are assuming things like commodity subsidies, etc., which the plan would restructure and send all that money to which kind of restructure and send all that money carbon sequestration, which means we us all the entirely the advantage picks. They have not made an argument as to why the counterplan is picked. You should treat this argument like I just said. If they have to win a link as well as an impact, they cannot read a link to this argument in the block. The counterplan is not a pick because it increases the entirety, or because it keeps the entirety of the 2002 Farm Bill subsidy levels in place, which means we do not eliminate any more subsidies, which means certainly this our argument also is critical to test all the hurt. They must spend all the word as one. Rule 8 created to our best health option will be competition checks regression because we have to prove the counterplan is beneficial. Little seeds, key leverage, extract, topical blend spikes, also is key to take rid of all counterplans and piece of facts. They will these parts of the F also key to check new furnace, exclude arguments, stop impact worse. Also, we shouldn't be held accountable for that school, all times indefensible. Getting fair education, fair debate, also kind of increased education class. All focus on solving the same mechanisms as well as increase your depth discussion. Also, net benefits that because are infinite, limited by the number of words in the resolution. And the plan also plans to focus debate. They resolution focus back because justifies things like hibernation, which is bad for underground. Also, rather than it checks a little later, the plan design the effort was able to restrict the plan. Mean they were predict the counterplan will be case selection if it time. Mean they should ever be ready for the counterplan dispo. First debates are for an across the argument for the other debates. Key to negative round way. They have if time case selection automatic bias will be to speak first. Last strategic edge also to roll Congress to debate multiple policies and reject all favors. That's go proving supposed to people also leads to cases away. If they mess up time issues because they fucked up, not because I read accountable will be helps because they can also choose the sequence with the only answer that benefits losing increase to strict gas because they cannot free to turns distance criticism theories and come and also arguments that disposition they can get advantage like we can continue to discuss the permutation check because they are disposition too as well as critical educational lectures and negative language or other arguments because they important later able to be as much responsibility consumers make my business better. Also we're negative, we're not supposed to make it easy. Now next argument group the 4 through 7 the ITSO argument CO2's case today by comment. First the overwhelming consensus scientists agree warming is real and humans are the cause and all your authors are bought off specifically ITSO instance in which are half your cards is Gilbson 97 the emphasis comes change also stage Michael's around making results in the oil zero and so sort of they made frequent pronunciation this program excluding a number of operations on the rest almost of the president Congress also have one woman on the whole interest of frustration to test briefly was as all the people know to do for the representing individual countries also so scenario it is not also the disease argument is laughable increases warming leads to longer lifespans of insects disease carrying out of mosquitoes there is no reason so slowing the rate of warming increases in insects lifespan also global warming causing North Atlantic current to shut down billions will die in a decade Calvin failed Northwest current the current also will take much of the position ways from are able to take less common enough of our competition also global warming also the North Atlantic current to shut down this will usher in an era of global cooling this is sauces and 97 North Atlantic currents within the ATC also going to all the warming stuff tomorrow of to contribute to melting so kind of also will be presumably to make it also more exploration latitudes also global warming also North Atlantic current shut down which will flip back the eternally to ICHS ECS with threats of 3 the rising west freshwater rising sea also causes low salinity also less events in the depths will drive the sea economies of forming investors sure that also tries to the oceans will also North Europe descended rapidly into an ice age also global warming will and as soon as few years or no that's the argument above also global warming causes North Atlantic current to shut down this causes global cooling and shut down and warming leads to freshwater runoff this can shut down the North Atlantic current this Roche 3 but the 6 largest European a lot of more freshwater will increase arteries as well as when the mechanism increase precipitation freshwater and back also scare back this relation of the North Atlantic also your ice age theory is flat atmospheric conditions greatly differ is volatile but the ice age also produced under the warrior army warming of variation or they're very different those who actually they're used to go back and not just word warm cells also as another strategies but we know today's conditions are at least one period changes in the time actually change where it has scientists just the 7,000 years also spectral fingerprints proves some Malkovich theory is flat as kind of 97 million times also just spectral fingerprints and also was clear about also economic feature the period of 100 decades of fingerprints also did not match spectral period predicted by Malkovich theory for the best years although this excellent cycle of also is global warming can lead to a feedback loop which caused big freeze as reinsures magazine 03 but it's willing to go up our climate change also rapid line with the temperature sudden reversal also led to global movement and the cause the ocean return which would more the mission greenhouse warming ultimately responsible for the big freeze also your application of the Malkovich theory is while the end of his interglacial period of millennia is a way we are not due for an ice age just Joyce and Kerwin 2002. Well, most of the population is listed by seniors, the kid ever suck like all the rest of former periods, glitch conditions, are also related to changes here, so of national access all also to war, changes of state also to war. This is the end of the present relation period, so the next stage may be several millennia away now. The next argument they say CO2 is key to food shift group 8 through 9 through the ISO evidence all the way up to the oscillations argument. First, stress by argument why consensus is negative. Their evidence is from ISO who is on the take and it was considered shouldn't by the argument. Also, CO2 from station alone will not offset CO2 alone will cause massive agricultural destruction, but also 92. But they also have also cause the river also warning issue crops the CO2 region moment. Was it would be sensitive poor and developed country with disadvantage, but also goes differential response to C3 and C4 positive increases forecast as well as making sugar and will also be avoided disadvantage increase when C3 reads the sacrifice to reduce concentration change. I'm saying it's extremely lethal saying will negative any benefits increases C2 region vomit is obvious C2 region vomit with much future effects on kind of such ecosystems as well as best scientific evidence and it will be saying such a deficit will not help listen friends the environment also may induce planetary warming also undermine the biological stability which all of us must also even without temperature increases CO2 alone will cause that common oscillations which would devastate agriculture and kill billions of millbirth 94 also there'll be a extended period in which the oscillation of scenario will be disturbed the common place behind that the agricultural rush of 40 million people that are surrounded with also presenting costs of horrible markets also warming will offset any CO2 benefits 5 reasons then 6 months 0 to 7 years why increasing common condition with the tendency for operations also water sustainable precipitation increasing compensation rates all the power or just like CO2 concentration saturated with increasing CO2 concentration frequency loads and temperature also particularly sensitive temperature zero right costs simply reduce the area of public productive agriculture and also climate change will cause shifting agriculture belts devastating global agriculture is more than one station places would also be avoidable energy climate change farming who knows so no will be taken for granted but the other scenarios warming will also be the other ones destruction global rate of greenhouse gases also will not be limited to regional costs needed economic cause warming will also condemning hundreds of millions of people to the poverty also CO2 benefits to crops are all in the short term this is 3 reasons but it's not 92 but the cons will also decrease later there's also reduction of photosynthesis over time plus industry one that have less environments also photosynthesis free center accumulated for there is other kind of photosynthesis there's so an effect to the reduction of concentration with enzyme another possible factor will be the increase in leaf thickness when you grow plants in carbon dioxide environments they tend to be the thicker leaves because it also may lead to a kind of photosynthesis regularly area basis also all their laboratory studies overestimate CO2 benefits 3 reasons Fisher and 6 of environment food so production CO2 as well as effects of realize on the short-term control of population laws so the stress also have the rule of the third planet warming and weeds of soil and liquid degree kind of permacils also CO2 destroys agriculture 3 reasons Fisher 96 weather from warm period the resources are on their almost solid hands so much reduced precipitation low benzoylation but initiation ultimately reduces also more evidence climate change will devastate global crop production killing billions is Gen 96 bubble in case climate change leads to net global reduction as well as all these amount of trees people so enough to increase 500 million more understand that climate change will reduce the death to 200,000 many people now next argument they say CO2 is also oscillations we are linked to these arguments CO2 leads the oscillations are evidence is clearly proven by the oscillating commentators where evidence is natural climate data scenario 6 there have been numerous other temperature some of these levels warming legal mean temperature is also incredible for rate and then reduce soil cover changes with precipitation and other indicators parameters or evidence supports the notion of very real and they climate diversion now the next argument is they read the piece of the adaptation to read the evidence but the first argument is Ross White argument with singers on the take also positive feedback will accelerate warming to 3 even though he expects feedback loop or simply words all the rest people go side trapping to be the edge this barely moving back and moving out of control with each other with anything a little faster to be done that's why depending on their situations really only protection we may see in increasing here there also is in the short-term continued notification also the rate of warming overall adaptation is Bernard and 3 demonstrations of homicidal climate change all climate change greatly we are altering natural hemisphere for everything advantages so we'll be able to adapt and keep climate base with that's when we go see ecosystems that divide the change room in 1980s US agricultural class it's just what if the natural resources which is spring training the next one where they say empirically not to kill stuff that's not true our evidence is devastating evidence is also warming will devastate every complex ecosystem this is Nirav read this card they say it kills globalization specific as well they say they read solar erosion but willing to turn these arguments carbon sequestration also read energy health of soil erosion increases carbon dioxide also reduces solar erosion of species Bruce Solidarity goes like opportunity to reduce nutrition and they have no unique serving one solar erosion no soil farmers not responding to the market they're not responding government subsidies yeah we'll take a second to prep
Just so you know, this card says
No.
that this was
You should read those.
anything was caused
Yeah.
by natural causes like during the
And that other
by
part.
fossil
Yeah, no.
fuels. So we have no evidence it's
Ready?
caused by fossil fuels. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to know how your camp plan solves any of our
Can you give
case.
me that?
Why don't we go down each of the advantages? So
Okay.
poverty, how?
Poverty? Well, your evidence says that the reason poverty in third world countries or in developing countries exists is because the United States funds commodity subsidies, things like cotton, corn, sugar beets,
Right,
which
yeah.
the United States is able to then sell in other countries at deflated prices.
Do you have evidence that's comparative to ours that indicates that you would be able to increase incomes equivalent to like 2.5
Well,
times
we've already
ours?
established that you have no reverse causal evidence that says that. However, our counterplan does or has the effect
Okay.
of solving that internally
Okay, so
because
you argue
we,
solve-
look, we,
okay,
we,
great.
we
All right,
changed
all right,
the allocation of
Philippines.
subsidies. No longer is
Philippines.
it given to sugar or cotton. It's given to carbon.
Philippines, how do you solve?
Huh?
How do you solve
Because your evidence talks about things like cotton and corn and sugar, which are devastating the Philippine economy.
Same
Dude,
internal link.
here. If you can point to one card in your 2A, or look, I'll give you the entire cross-section to look through your
great.
entire boxes
No,
to
I'm
say
not gonna waste my
carbon
time doing that.
programs
All right,
are
trade.
devastating third world poverty. Can you read a card
Trade.
that says that? Trade?
This is my cross-ex.
Well,
Trade.
trade for the same reason. The reason trade negotiation credibility is being devastated is because the United States is pissing
There's a
other
lot of-
countries off by flooding
There's a
their
lot of
market
production. What
with
about the
commodity
perception? What about the
subsidies.
perception? Because our plan actually removes these subsidies. Other countries won't perceive post the counter plan that you have removed any subsidies.
Yes,
So why
yes,
would
they
sit
will,
down
because
at
we
a
won't be
table with us?
dumping products into their market.
Okay, so you're going to argue that there is perception for your counter plan.
Yes, as soon as the
Okay.
United States
Great.
stops selling subsidies, which would
That's
happen,
great.
or
All right.
stop selling commodities, which would happen
Do you have any
immediately.
evidence? Were you trying to turn our arguments on Ice Age, where you say that there's going to be an NAC shutdown? Do you have any evidence that indicates that this is caused by fossil fuels as opposed to the natural climate cycles of the Earth?
No,
Because
yes,
one of
you're
your
right. It's caused
facts-
by natural cycles, which is why we need to sequester carbon to prevent it from happening.
Right, but this evidence says that it happens no matter what, because in fact the underlying part says that this is what scientists think happened during a bizarre cold snap called the Younger Days about 11,400 years ago, when the planet was just coming out of the last ice age.
Yes,
So I
you're
don't
right. There
understand
was
why
an
fossil
ice
fuels have
age which
anything-
happened before.
Right. Ugh.
When there
And
wasn't
so
the same
I
amount
understand
of
how fossil
adaptation
fuels have anything
changes.
to do with this, and why your counter plan will stave off. these
Hey,
problems, or
just
why this
because
answer
there
is
was an
an
ice age before doesn't mean disprove our argument. Our evidence talks about the current climate situation in which fossil fuel use and warming is increasing. Our evidence says in the status quo that will cause that will be devastating to the
other-
North Atlantic current.
Okay, that's great. The other question I have about this evidence is none of this really talks about it causing an ice age, like a full impact of an ice age. It seems to be more about like a negative feedback, that this will cause cooling and some.
Well, our evidence
Does your
says it would cause
our
rapid,
evidence talks about
extreme, and
massive
immediate
temperature
global cooling.
changes in the hundreds of degree levels. This evidence talks about temperature changes in the few degree levels. Do you have any evidence that indicates that this process?
I dispute that. Our evidence says it would cause an ice age
Okay, you
similar
have, you
to.
have one card, and it's like I hope this.
I read like 5 cards on this.
Right,
actually.
but none of these cards say ice age except for this one where the guy's like,
assumes
I
a
hope
North
that this
Atlantic
doesn't
current,
cause
which is
another
what-
ice age.
No, our evidence does say it would cause an ice age, dude.
Okay, here, well, why don't you read all these cards there across the invasion and show me which cards talk about the ice age. Besides the one where he's like, I'm afraid of an ice age. Yeah, those two weren't very good.
I mean, I can't read it until you fucking give me a chance to do it. So.
All right, it's
I just
the-
want to prove it.
I mean, well, I mean, do you want me to? Do you
I'm
want
not
me to show
gonna take.
you?
No, I'm not gonna take prep time for this.
That's because you don't want to see what I have to say.
Okay.
It's devastating.
All right, it's the counter plan, the trade advantage, the poverty advantage, and then the Philippines aggression, Chinese aggression advantage.
Trade advantage, then what? Trade,
Poverty,
poverty, Philippines.
Cool. No, you do, but tag it as
We'll take a second to prep.
tag it as even conservative hacks and thought within the Bush administration concede there is a problem that it cause extinction. Prove warming theory.
It's all based off. It's all based on we have to sort of
All right, we're ready.
All right, sorry.
I'll go get this.
Counter plan, trade, poverty, China.
Can you just hang on one second? I just want to sit next to you so I can get it. I'm not gonna bug you.
Sit over here, if you don't mind. Cool. Everyone ready? John?
No.
You need a pen?
Yeah.
Here.
A little water.
The hotel water really dries up your mouth.
Yeah, it does, dude.
Fuck it.
All right. Even conservative hawks in the Bush administration continue warming through answers all the organizations he found precedent to get forcing a report by the Pentagon reforms that change immediately to global catastrophe, costing millions of lives, sitting for a greater threat than terrorism. The report was covered by U.S. Defense Chiefs performance. The Pentagon report except our climate change will also bring the planet to the edge of anarchy as countries develop nuclear threat, defense, security, abundantly food security, and energy supply disruption, conflict, and endemic future wars. Warfare would also define human life. It's author Peter Schwartz, former head of Planning World Show. Companies said that climate change will also be considered immediately a top political and military issue. It also be elevated beyond a scientific debate to U.S. national security concern coming from the Pentagon. Only conservative politics. The report is expected environmental assistance. A concerned science the Bush administration have global destroyed, and de facto service and policy agendas have misled the public. Washington systematically skewed governance studies, scientific study, often stack panels is also long terms back there. U.S. leadership arguments and warming will collapse all complex ecosystems, under devastating global atmosphere airs, and 2K, fourth global temperature rise between 2 to 60 to 35% of planet species. Also, we get exchange by 2051. Many of our planet species also successfully object to change, and the plastic difference now calls be the speed of current warming. Human real cause release of carbon dioxide and other climate warming gases all appear to have triggered a more sudden change in the planet's temperature. The many species will also be able to tap to the species also will enable to be survived massive of this magnitude also impacts on human life where we can also produce food, but also charges about disease will increase in sequestration, so the environmental impacts of overgrazing, glucose, and 2K2 carbon is as a replant life. A large percent of our souls around cancer and do not contain adequate carbon and promote optimal plant growth, but also solve carbon increase through proper management. We also can lower these carbon dioxide levels in their area plant in order our souls making our farms and ranches even more sustainable. Overgrazing form ecological degradation. If we overgraze, we suffer on the course of economic destruction. We look for the additional ways we can come to resolve from good management on the land, such as carbon trade advantage. They have lost the debate by reading this advantage. If you're so damn smart at Georgia State, you should have thought about this again. The uniqueness links they read about why the farm subsidies deficit U.S. trade negotiation authority and the ability to garner trade concessions. Their impacts are not about U.S. trade credibility, but rather why global free trade is good. The problem is that the United States does not use its trade leadership to push for global free trade agreements, but rather regional bilateral agreements that are the exact opposite of global free trade. You've even seen it in the news before. The U.S. push for things like the free trade area of the Americas with the Central American Free Trade Agreements are one, and see layer evidence. Those sorts of bilateral trading blocks are the exact opposite of what their impacts talk about. The reason why free trade solves war and conflicts that makes everyone economically dependent on everyone else. Also, that one has the incentive for conflict. The United States engages in preferential free trade agreements that we don't make anyone dependent on everyone else. We also make the United States dependent on those few regional allies who we have bilateral deals with, in effect, excluding the rest of the world who want to be avoided. These perfect contextual example of the Middle East. The United States pursues deals with countries like Turkey, established qualified industrial zones who allow the free flow of goods to allow access to gas fuel, so that we cannot be dependent on the volatile Middle East. Third, terrorism impact is another example. Terrorists react to the unequal playing field created by U.S. economic policies that are pursuing bilateral free trade. The United States will pursue economic deals that benefit only Americans. Hypocritical sense the terrorists respond to, proving that there's only a risk of terrorism with the trade that the affirmative encourages the status quo, in which we don't have this trade negotiation credibility because the farm bill evolves. So, reduce the impact terrorist attack causes major exchange to use biological weapons, and the lack of free trade makes you, as go in America, we use whatever trade leverage it has to augment bilateral free trade agreements. This is late grade 2K3. The South American trade negotiation claim otherwise bilateral regional negotiations for facade of free trade. There are also definition instrument for granting differences of some countries. They impose handicaps of this often negotiating regional and bilateral agreements of the country taking a web of release of tariff examined often origin requirements, and the constrained commerce such as also by definition partially encompass at least small fraction of American subtle trade and more evidence. America will use trade levels organized to get through. American officials also suggest that collecting by letting regional economic deals put your pressure on EU, China, and other leading WTO members negotiate starting a strategy to look at compatible liberalization. You will also work with these companies that believe economic trade is through openness and strategy simple to use to pursue compatible economic liberalization. The clubs of the halls around to help trigger need law protection, which the United States is leading the way, and regional trade agreements are devastating multilateral free trade. Who and 2K1 and let the increase in RT is an important question that RT is all promote global trade liberalization. The WTO and RT is all can be an obstacle to achieving global free trade. Close trade laws through the inner war period. Also note above all less potential kind of bullshit often presented the likely outcome of RT the AC and these regional trade agreements alternative exclusive trading blocks. And 2K1's important example the impact of RT as a trade division also potentially negative impact on the members of the trade effect. Also definitely undesirable impact on members. RT has reduced the export opportunity for non-members would also be a concern with negative impact Russian wars for potential retaliation from non-members who are placed at disadvantage of the situation. Next argument, this also turns out their advantage to form trade blocks they create or developing countries as US and world new party into 2K1 trading blocks and also results from regional protection which boosts import prices. Small countries left out of the trading blocks must be the most heard. The protests marching one of the World Bank to expand aid to these countries extend. You didn't give me the rest of those extensions.
That's fine. Okay.
We're not extend 1NC number 3. Extend the 1NC number 4. Argument there's no risk of the trade. Advantage Escalin. Schoenberg evidence indicates that there are multiple reasons why it's been disproved, such as the Tokyo collapse and also protectionism is devil because other multiple things like steel and but Nano's one of those arguments as the last card rid poverty. Extend the 1NC number 1, the 1E won't reciprocate. The Hawkins evidence shows how European subsidies are 3 to 4 times higher than those in the United States, which devastates their ability to solve because even if they can reduce US subsidies, European companies will still be heavily subsidized along European dumping of goods on developing countries and crushing the domestic industry. The plan is not solve EU reciprocation. They put as subsidies before the US proving it wasn't a casual relationship, but they cannot stop the economic incentive for Europe to ensure agricultural subsidization programs. And next argument is extend the 1NC number 2 argument. The pesticides group these arguments. They say pesticides decreasing right now with hints of suburban competition. However, they're wrong on this argument. Poor environmental regulations and an abundance of toxic chemicals make the revival of third world agriculture major threats to safety. Safety protocols allow third world farmers to use access to pesticides and petrochemicals in food production. The plan enhances third world agriculture, thus encourages the use of pesticides. That's bad. The health idea media group evidence says pesticides are environmental destructive, improving the plan will ultimately collapse third world agriculture in the long term by causing the continuation of these unsustainable food practices. And 1NC number 3 are the 1NC number the 3 argument banning US subsidies would nothing to level the playing field that exists in international agriculture production. Banning subsidies does not account for the things like increased agricultural productivity, which has the exact same effect as subsidies making the plan cannot allow developing countries to access those markets in the first place. And extend the 1NC number 5 argument. The alternative causalities arguments group all these arguments are evidence gives a litany of reasons why banning US farm subsidies will do nothing to stop poverty and starvation, developing countries, things like massive amounts of international debt, lack of infrastructure, war, disease, drought, and political turmoil all significant factors that outpace the ability to promote economic independence. And Baker evidence says that it things like the plan which divert attention from these broader source of poverty and starvation by causing policymakers and NGOs to focus on these efforts issues that is largely tangential to these issues. And he refers to World Bank study, one of the world's leading advocates of removing trade barriers, who concedes that it won't happen. Extend the 1NC 5 argument. Baker evidence it confirms the WTO report discussed above, saying that many of the subsidies and reports that affirmative type agricultural liberalization devastating for third world farmers is answers their 2.5 argument on point. Our evidence cites World Bank analysis, which is much more qualified than the arguments.
Wait, read the other card.
And this is Baker in 2K, Wellbeck in 2K3. OECD countries gave out $330 billion in overall support for agriculture, $90 billion to rocket government subsidies. There's market access barriers. Now they talk about reducing subsidies, starting with export subsidies, which are a very small part, but they're not really talking about increasing market access as a big part of the agricultural argument. Philippines. Group the entire debate. They have not answered the fundamental claim that our arguments make is that the United States conventional security and nuclear deterrence have the ability to deter any forms of Chinese attack, which means there's no risk of miscalculation. They say miscalculation in short term. However, they've conceded our argument that there's no risk of this because the United States' 7th fleet is already in there right now, which means that Chinese aggressions have already started. If we win any of our arguments on any of the advantages to prove why they have no ability to solve for these arguments, and we're only turning all those arguments back in Chinese, we'll kick their ass. There's no risk of nuclear disarms of Waldron to get their arm control, not weaken the negotiations, not proliferation. When we think about it, turns out ugly and fighting, preventing nuclear holocaust. It's also precisely the Holocaust of Prieur aspect of nuclear weapons. It gives them much more their friendliness, and world won't escalate. That's conceded, yeah.
What was the last one?
War won't escalate.
The 2AC number 3. Or the one
I think it's just generic.
It's just like, what's the first thing you should go for? I got 40 seconds. You can understand.
Yeah, you can just ask them, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm right.
Oh man, it's fucking tall. I don't know what to do about this per se. I'm gonna stand over there. It's a little bit tall for me here. I'll stand it.
Can we have all of our counterplaying cards back?
Yeah, can we have all of ours?
Yeah.
Where are theirs, Johnny? Here, it's theirs.
I kept yours nice and neat.
Thank you. Yeah, we took some.
Yeah, I have
I
like
took
half
a-
of them, but I'm missing like all of them.
These all yours?
I mean, that's the one AC.
I'll just keep using it.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I didn't see
Let's see.
it.
I guess I should
send
wait
it
for
over
this
here.
fucker.
Did you take them? I took a few. I only remember taking a few. Look out your chair. I didn't take a chair.
We're doing this for you.
You ordered these right here. Here's
What's
some.
up? Yeah. What are y'all looking for?
Our warming cards?
Our warming card?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
I don't think we have any more, dude.
We'll find it for you. It doesn't matter. No by sight. Okay. The order. Famine.
Wait, say that again?
Famine. Trade.
Was that poverty?
Yeah. Or poverty, trade, the Philippines, counterplay.
Hey, hold on one second.
All ready?
No. Hey, do you have the over there?
Not going over theory.
You're not going for either?
No.
No?
Thank you.
Solved that?
No problem. Everyone ready?
Poverty to see that 30 with this and altered causality, environmental collapse as size would lead to environmental destruction. The campaign also does the same thing, leads to environmental destruction in the short term. That means that warming can't perpetuate. Also concede their arguments that debt and political turmoil will inevitably cause poverty. They concede our diagrams of the one see that poverty is critical to food security. They can't access their warming solves agriculture argument, which means that IC is only impact left to the round out trade. Concede their argument that protection is inevitable. The campaign also solves for this, which means there's no offense. Philippines. Concede their argument that wars won't escalate, which means that there's no risk of miscalculation. There's also no risk of their offensive terms. And the campaign would always be able to solve it. We'll concede that argument on the campaign. Now the campaign at the top of the group these overview. There is no warrants explained in his impact evidence on the one see. There's also just a laundry list, which means that don't give any risk of their terminal impact because there's not explained. And they don't want to see a Gelfman evidence. Now they say Gelfman, he's an idiot. This is green. And Nadia Gelfman pulls around the prison. He's not something listening from the doctors. The environmental project is Gelfman says Gelfman have never visited the SCP office to refute the die. And finding safe Gelfman claimed high funds good time 100 flying steps. The limited declaration conclusion of the IPCC. Now their next argument they see sea levels. However, on the overview they see sea levels. There's no explanation of this argument. There's no impact to the argument anyway. They say disease that stands below that technological distribution. The reason why disease occurred, not warming. Michaels has done multiple studies proving this argument. They say resource worth. There's no resource worth because there's no draft. This is Michael's polling. In 2000, all comments and analysts committee first investigate had noted all trends toward decreasing moisture level, hence the use of identification. Found no overall trends in temperature participation. Found trends in variable current index, which over some participation. You can find no trends in the data, nothing. And it's now leading anybody believes that jobs are becoming more frequent in the central part of the United States. Now, Ice Age. At the top, we will control the impact accuracy subpoint in time frame on which the evidence indicates in the left hand next 75 years there will be an ice age in the future. B subpoint is magnitude. Felix evidence indicates that outweighs explosion of every nuclear weapons on Earth. We also control the uniqueness of our evidence indicates that the ice age is occurring now. The temperature cycles guarantees that the shift to ice age condition will happen in the warming is the only way to prevent this transition. They can see our internal link evidence that warming is critical to prevent that and all. That is our issue of warming solves their offense. A subpoint to prevent weather oscillation and solves the negative effects of temperature change. B subpoint adaptation possible. Our evidence indicates that adaptation has empirically been possible to environment destruction. C subpoint they don't read an environment impact in this debate, which means that they can't access any of their offense if they don't win their turns on ice age. First argument, they say warming is now. We'll concede this argument. However, there ITSO references 75 peer-reviewed articles. This Len 99 study by ITSO, bolstered by 75 peer-reviewed literature, and the absent evidence is more biased. Michael Ball in 2000 completely comes for funding. This comes to essential scientific for serious political study. They consider public funding that individuals in the public sector their own self-interest for the model public views. The source is biased toward the political views of the recipients of funds will support that political view. Individuals will less than confronting the opportunity of research political process. High school calls on money without political support, so it must be politicized for major sonic for to materialize. And now the next argument they say it causes cooling. Group these arguments. Their evidence talks about natural causes of the sun shifted to the North Atlantic current, not the causes adopted by the campaign. Also, there's no UT says to turn ice age inevitable even without warming due to natural climate change. And you lose a subpoint. There's not enough scientific evidence to support this claim. This is Bradley 2000. The confident as theoretical news science that freshwater makes salty pollution. A professor of meteorology at MIT responded, "What cannot observe the conveyor belt institution, even the conveyor belt, where recent depiction of thermochemically will not know that cooling warming is to be more likely than sugar chain. Any possibly in the wrong direction. B subpoint Calvinist and qualified. This is in 2000. Britain, the he's not an ocean specialist. Real expert down the halls of oceanography director of the MIT, which is one of the top scientists in the field of oceanography, which response follows the ocean is like the heat and salt, but also made a very heat place. The conveyor belt is possibly impossible to think of the real system of the kind of better terms. So it's just a bunch of stories, and also your theory is stupid, relies on outdated studies. And the release of freshwater subsequent cooling will be linear, which allows for adaptation in 2002 with respect to the claim of THC shutdowns relies on outdated. It studies dramatic regional cooling caused by the Castro release of huge amounts of what a result of final outbursts of drainage condition with the cases classified holdover phenomenon by parts of the interglacial period North Atlantic seawater production just experience limited from the volume of freshwater added. This will ultimately lead to a gradual and THC the right cooling oscillation much more modest amplitude than abrupt changes. Oh no, what is concerned, and also no chance on ice age inevitable unless greenhouse gases increase and temperatures will have no effect on ice age melting. Locker 95 things. Well, stopping from ice age at present time because but no matter what we do, resulting causes greenhouse gas emission possibly causing ice age as a result. The melt has started some dynamics will carry on no matter what has to continue the growth shrinking will continue. We cannot stop any more. Calvin concedes current technology and also their argument is empirically disproven. A collapse in North Atlantic circulation won't cause northern cooling. This is going to be in the 01. A much larger freshwater fishery mix the effect of ice on sheet and the sequence of the events show the gradual warming and increasingly high prevents the collapse of NHW formulation. No reach to threat of cooling securing by warm above the freshwater budget. The North Sea is dominated by the vigorous exertion anomalies and surface holding and creating necessarily anomalies and terms of scope of the highly seen in our Mabel studies with 115 years forcing cycle. The climate change is not now the exact time they say the ice age theory is flawed. However, our evidence is based on empirical studies. Our evidence indicates that the ice age coming now. So evidence is based on a study by mathematicians and projects with the Cornell that have PhDs, and also an ice age coming down. One has come every 11,500 years. It's empirically proven. There's Felix 2000 years. It will begin to bang. If ice age being 11,500 years comes at enormous level, the praise of forms to say the ice age began abruptly. We'll have it again. We wishful thinking. It's the period war lasted about 1,500 years. 11,500 years ago. Next action begin tomorrow, and recent temperature data proves our argument. This is Felix 2000. Installation has already begun. There's in North Dakota. On 10 months here, we sit worried about global warming. The winter of Jerusalem, the social, the war sites, and Memory, Montreal, and going to just coldest impulse since 1982. The record-breaking snowstorms sweep across the great parts of the world, including Scotland, Germany. The temperature are falling, and also orbit spin makes an ice age inevitable. This is Felix 2000. Economic peacemaker of ice age called to conclude that changes in Earth's orbital temperature will cause the ice age a long-term trend of extensive North Atlantic courses. The theory of ice age is right. Their next time they say feedback loop is answered by evidence in case that warming is the only way to prevent an ice age. If you can see that internally from the one seat, they say no ice age now. However, even if we lose this argument, they say even if we lose this argument, our evidence in the case that warming will prevent future ice ages, which means as long as we can adapt in the status quo, we would prevent a future ice age, which is now because of the temperature crisis. Now the food shortage is group debate. Group it. This is all answered by our evidence. There's no offense. Here's no evidence indicate they don't extend an impact to this agricultural answer. We will not answer. They say oscillation. However, this is answered by Israel Michael's answer, which indicates that whether oscillation will be checked by warming, which was inevitably proven, which is empirically proven by the past. They say shifting agriculture and China in the short term. We will not go for these arguments as taken out by our answer. And they've also conceded our argument that even if we lose these arguments, the ice age outweighs since it would destroy agriculture in the long run. It's a try or die situation really negative. They say no to adaptation. Group these arguments. They concede our evidence indicates that warming is necessary for tropical biodiversity, which means that even if we lose the rest of the biodiversity debate, then in biodiversity hotspots warming is necessary to prevent those from collapsing, such as in Latin America and Africa. They also concede our soil loss evidence. Even if we lose that, it destroys biodiversity in future. Our evidence indicates that soil diversity is necessary to prevent a collapse of biodiversity, which means that either it's inevitable or they can't access any of their offense. They say Bush proves the cause of extinction. We've answered the warrants behind the seventh, which indicates that resource wars and environmental collapse is inevitable. However, our evidence indicates that adaptation is possible within the confines of warming. They've also conceded our arguments that status quo ever solved disease, which means there's no risk of that impact.
How much?
So I can just answer their arguments in 2AR.
Time frame that shit up.
There ain't no time frame here, dude. It's all impact. Where's Eber? Eber.
You trying to ice you? Eber trying to ice him, dude. Wrong. Yeah, no, dude, it's wrong, man. Revenge.
We got everyone? All 15 of you? All right. Poverty, trade, Philippines, counterpoint. What's that?
He's going back to your overview.
Yeah. I just flowed that. Everyone ready? They say the impact is inevitable because of the environmental structure against pesticides. That is ridiculous. Our evidence is not. Our pesticides evidence says it would cause about 10,000 cancer that is not equivalent to global extinction due to rapid warming. Our Galveston evidence gives multiple scenarios, which will all be explained on climate, trade debate, group. They say poverty is due to food security, which means we cannot solve our impacts. That's not true. Food security is different than global famine. Warming will devastate global agriculture, which means billions will die if we win. If they have not even gone for any of their CO2 agriculture arguments, which proves arguments that it would swamp any risk of their ability to solve. They don't even explain this argument. They're not all of them to extrapolate new warrants in the 2 hours because we don't have a 2 hour response to the Philippines. They say war should not escalate. That's not true. The only evidence that we read was about China. Our evidence indicates that there will be multiple other scenarios for wars involving the North and the South, which will cause global extinction. They say there's no risk of terrorism, but there's no argument for that. We never made the argument that there was no risk of terrorism. We just said that you cannot solve. Counterpoint. The kicker in this debate will be the Agents France press evidence that Nirav reads in the 1 hour that was not answered by the 1 hour. Our evidence is phenomenal. It says a recent study by the Pentagon, by the Bush administration, who have been leading advocates against global warming. Our evidence cites the author of the study, who was the recent special executive leader of Royal Dutch Shell, who was formerly an oil hack. Our evidence indicates that the Bush administration has been engaging in a campaign of environmental distortion, which proves that all their evidence is bought off by the fossil fuel industry as well as by the Bush administration. Our evidence says that most conclusive evidence by the ultra-conservative hacks are ultimately admitting the warming theory is true and that all their evidence is junk science. Our evidence concludes is based upon the preponderance of evidence as well as the most recent evidence. They have no answer to any of these arguments. They don't want to respond to these arguments because he does not even breathe on this argument in the 2 hour. They say there's no warrant because the laundry list. That's not true. Our evidence gives many warrants, such as the Agents France press evidence I just referred to says warming will cause devastating wars across the globe. Our evidence compares the threat. Our evidence says the threat is comparable to nuclear terrorism in the United States. It is that significant arrest. Our evidence gives multiple other warrants, such as sea level rise, will swallow up whole island nations, as well as changing agricultural belts will devastate global agriculture, as well as the fact that simple CO2 will devastate global agriculture. That's our Chen evidence, which indicates it will kill billions. They read Gelfman evidence, but this evidence only says that Gelfman was not a Pulitzer Prize winner. We're not claiming he was a Pulitzer Prize winner, and that doesn't mean he's not scientifically credible. And his evidence says he ignores people like Singer. We read an indictment of Singer that says they are bought off by the fossil fuel industry, and they have no answer to it. The only indictment they actually attempt to respond to is ITSO, and they respond to ITSO by reading a card by ITSO saying he is qualified. They have no justification for the broader skeptics. Our evidence indicates there is a consensus of international scientists who support our argument, as well as a conservative hacks who support our argument, which proves our argument is true. They say we have no evidence to sea level rise. That's not true. It's our NCDC evidence, which you have conceded. And they read the Michael evidence indicates there's no resource force. They have conceded our Michael's indictment, which indicates that he is bought off by the fossil fuel industry as well, which are ultimately a reason to prefer our argument, as well as the fact that Agents France press evidence should be preferred because it's coming from the conservative hawks they are talking to. Ice Age.
310.
They say the time frame is more important because it comes from the next 5 years. That is ridiculous. We do not solve in the next 5 years. There's been no argument made to that effect. We have consistently claimed from the 1AC shell as well the 2AC onward that the counter plan provides a time for adaptation, which means in the next 30 to 40 years we'll be able to prevent the doubling of carbon dioxide. It's not mean we will solve in the short term, which means they have absolutely zero risk of winning. Short term, they drop the ability. They drop our argument that in the next 30 years there's a risk of resource wars, which means it's only the ability the counter plan will be able to buy time for adaptation. They have now they say magnitude, but there are multiple answers to this. First, they consider our carbon negative acidic warming causes failure of the northern loop of the North Atlantic current. This causes a population crash, killing entire civilizations, as well as climate change must be stabilized in order to prevent next cooling. They also consider sloping ice evidence in the case of warming of the North Atlantic current makes it warm for incoming currents to the sink. This brings one AC system to hold warming, increases water vapor. This melts glaciers, contributing to overall cooling, as well as warming increases ocean surface temperatures, which prevents cool water from sinking. The cooling results in greater ice formations, as well as ECSO3 evidence in the case of melting ice age will limit the amount of fresh water that enters the Norwegian Sea. This lowers salinity, meaning water is less dense. Light water cannot sink to cool the ocean, and warming lowers the formation of a new ice age. This prevents ocean circulation causing global cooling, as well as historical studies from the accuracy of the alteration of glacier flows, as well as the sloping ice evidence against North Atlantic warming caused by the cyclotransportation of DC water, as well as that warming halts the process causing global cooling, as well as the other ECS evidence indicates Northern Europe is heading towards global cooling period because of global warming status quo, which answers their empirically that argument. Our studies account for all the changes in the past 50 years, and it also says ocean currents are a huge factor of global cooling, as well as climate change spread ocean conveyor belts, which are ultimately crucial for ocean cooling. The impact is a drop in European temperatures, which make global agriculture unsustainable. The other ECS evidence indicates a shutoff in the ocean conveyor belt, which crushes agricultural production, creating a shorter growing season. The road shoot stew evidence indicates warming causes more freshwater dumping into the Arctic Ocean, which will shut down the North Atlantic current. Flipping back internally to that freshwater dumping argument, the Baltic stew evidence indicates the premise of Ice Age 3 is incorrect because orbital change in atmospheric conditions do not match historical conditions for coming ice age, as well as the continental evidence indicates recent spectral fingerprints to prove their Milankovitch cycles argument. The impact of this is that their theory that we are currently in the midst of an ice age is dead wrong because it doesn't account for the current climate changes. They say adaptation is possible, but they drop argument our feedback effects. The Hunter evidence compares it to driving a car with an odometer that says we are speeding fine when in fact we are racing out of control. The impact of this argument is that we have to buy a time for adaptation. They say is reviewed by 75 peer-reviewed studies. Yes, 75 studies which are peer-reviewed by his brothers and his cousins and people like Balling and Singer, which are all bought off. It's ITSO quoting ITSO. There's zero justification for you to further this argument. They draw our argument that he receives $250,000 each year by Exxon, which proves our argument. They read another call by Ballings, but their evidence is most biased, which because they're funded by the fossil industry. They say natural. They say our evidence is talking about natural, but we would still solve for that because even if cooling is natural, because even if that ice is natural in status quo, we would still be able to trap CO2, which was told the argument. They say it's not science, but our evidence is reverse causal based on empirical studies. They say Calvin's not qualified, but we only will cover Calvin. There's no warrant for this evidence. They say freshwater adaptation, but our evidence indicates it's regionally limited, which means it will not spread across the globe, proving there's no impact to global ice age, and only Earth will be able to internally turn. They say it's empirically disproven, but how is it empirically disproven? Because our evidence is specific to future doubling of CO2, which means our evidence is empirically proven. It's talking about studies in status quo. They say ice age causing by 100,000 years group the next requires our evidence is all answered above, gives warrants. I answer the adaptation argument as well, the Bernard evidence, and proves there's no risk by isolation group. The last arguments, it may look like I'm not getting enough time, but all of our arguments are answered above. The soil loss key to prevention argument is solved because they can see our evidence indicates the carbon sequestration would solve soil loss, which means we can solve the global all their internal leaks by warming spent.
There are a couple of defensive arguments I need you to extend. First is they've dropped the argument that adaptation is possible.
Anything?
I'd like to see the Age of France press cards. I assume it's the one on the computer.
Yeah.
I'll get it for you.
Thanks. How much do they have?
I'm
Anyone?
serious about that.
Hey, Beckley, anything else?
Sorry, how
Counterplan.
Hey, what were the advantage orders?
Poverty trade.
Already trade counterplan. Extend their evidence indicates that debt and conflict means that there's going to be food shortages in the status quo. That proves that resource scarcity is inevitable in the status quo, which takes out their only impact that they extend the 2 to global warming. Now the trade advantage extended as evidence indicates that food security is difficult. Proves that resource scarcity is inevitable. Also, that means that even if resources are abundant, that distribution will prevent people from eating, which proves why you should vote on Ice Age first. Counterpoint. Even if they want some impact to warning, our evidence indicates that ice age outweighs the 8 points time frame. Our evidence indicates that an ice age is due in 50 years. The warning impacts will happen for hundreds of years, like the sea level rise, the beast point's magnitude. Our evidence indicates that it outweighs the destruction, the detonation of every nuclear weapon on Earth, and they can see that humans can adapt to diseases and biodiversity loss and resource scarcity, but warming will prevent oscillations, which solves back all their offense because there aren't positive feedbacks that leads to rapid amounts of warming, which is what all their impact evidence assumes. Also, it proves that there's less variation in a warming trend, which means that there's less temperature oscillations, and they don't extend and impact to disease or biodiversity, which means that there's functionally nothing to compare to our magnitude of our massive ice age impact, except for nuclear terrorism, which isn't even an articulated impact in the 2 and the C's point, is evidence. We control the quality of evidence on 2 levels. The first is the amount of funding. Our Michaels, our Green, and our Leonard evidence indicate that our authors get more, their authors actually get more money from the U.S. federal government than the oil companies give to our authors, that the federal government actually pressures those groups and their authors to cover up the benefits of CO2 fertilization. The second is simply the quality of our evidence. Our Bradley evidence indicates that professors of oceanology indicate that there is no way that the North Atlantic current will actually collapse because of human-induced warming. The third is that our evidence is most conclusive. It cites the latest studies, and it says it bluntly, whereas his evidence just says, well, we fear an ice age, which is not conclusive evidence. Also, they concede our evidence indicates that despite that adaptation is possible, and you should put aside your political dispositions. We are flat out destroying them on the indictment debate, which means you should give all of our evidence, prefer our evidence much more than theirs, and our evidence is much more warranted and indicts their impact of warming. And also, it makes sense in the context of the Pentagon report, which he stakes the round on. Our evidence indicates that to win the election now, Bush wants to look like he's pro-environment, so it gives him a unique political incentive to give more funding to groups that say that there's environmental catastrophe in the status quo, and that's supported by our Michaels and Blunt evidence indicates that the federal government exaggerates the impacts of warming, and their evidence has no warrants why climate change is bad. Our Blunt evidence indicates that there will be no drought, so there is no terminal impact of warming. Now, on the top, he says that the studies are done by Bush, but our evidence indicates Bush is not credible, and also it just says that warming is happening now, which we're conceding, but our evidence indicates that it's not going to be fast warming because they concede. Our evidence indicates that negative feedback, such as oceans and phytoplankton within those oceans, will act as negative feedbacks and suck away the amounts of CO2 that will lead to rapid amounts of warming. Our scientists say that warming will actually be slow. He says that he says he has this big impact of nuclear terror. Look, we can spot them, this nuclear terrorism impact. Our evidence indicates that their attempts to outweigh us are laughable and pathetic because our impacts assume the detonation of every nuclear weapon on globe. That's the 60,000 nuclear detonations. He says sea level rise never articulates a terminal impact, and this would be extremely long-term. Evidence indicates that there was no way that warming would ever get to this point where the polar ice caps would melt and cause a sea level rise. Our evidence indicates that the negative feedbacks are checked. The last 2 RMC indicates that Gelspan and Singer is bought off by oil companies, while our evidence indicates that the federal government pays more to them, and ITSO writes our evidence and he's more qualified. Now, the top of the counterpoint debate, the ice age debate. Put your political disposition aside. We control the uniqueness. Warming is the only way to offset the current cycle that will inevitably return us to the ice age conditions. Specifically, CO2 is key to averting a crisis that will freeze over all ecosystems and agriculture throughout the world. And ice ages are inevitable. The ASA point is orbit spin cycles are Felix, and our ITSO evidence indicates that the tilt of the Earth guarantees that an ice age will occur in regular increments. The BESA point is empirical proof. Studies show that every 11,500 years there's a regular ice age. The last time it killed off all the dinosaurs. The next time it will wipe out all of us. And prefer our evidence is based on recent temperature calculations. Our ITSO and our Felix evidence argues that all the area globes are experiencing extremely cold temperatures, and only warming will solve for this. And also, their only offense in this debate is based off of one argument, the collapse of the northern oceanic circulation. Here's a couple arguments that they haven't answered. The first is our Bradley evidence indicates that there's not enough scientific evidence to prove Calvin's theory correct. That proves why our studies are actually much more conclusive and are based on professors of oceanology. Also, and also the ocean does not move linearly like their authors assume, which proves why they're based on false predictions. Also, our Bradley evidence also indicates that Calvin is qualified because he ignores key components in the ocean circuit layer conveyor belt. And also, our ITSO evidence indicates that their theory is stupid because it relies on outdated studies, and the release of freshwater and subsequent cooling would be linear, which allows for more adaptation. And our Locker evidence indicates that there's no possibility for them to turn this argument back on us because an ice age is inevitable unless greenhouse gases increases and temperatures will have no effect on the ice sheet melting. And our philosophy evidence indicates that their argument is empirically disproven that a collapse in North Atlantic circulation wouldn't cause northern cooling, and Greenland empirically proves that because it didn't cause massive amounts of circulation collapse. And also, this evidence is much more qualified than them because it's based on actual climate studies, whereas theirs is just speculation. He says that increases ocean temperatures, but another evidence actually says ice age. It's not conclusive. And also, our evidence indicates that the decrease in temperature would actually be mild, and our evidence cites broader changes like the tilt of the globe or the proximity of the sun, which are things that can't be changed. Also, temperature data proves that it's already begun, that this is just the calm before the storm. He says that He says that we can't adapt to it. Our ITSO evidence indicates that adaptation would check oscillation so that warming is not fast. He says that ITSO is written by he says that ITSO is basically peer reviewed by Mama ITSO, but that's not true because it's a our evidence says that ITSO was actually reviewed and supported by a nonpartisan magazine that cites the consensus of 75 peer published studies, and it cites multiple other studies. He also concedes our evidence indicates that his evidence is based on outdated studies, and also that our evidence is empirically proves that there's no actual collapse of the sheet. Now, on the bottom of the debate, he says that soil will solve for the carbon sequestration, but he concedes our evidence indicates that tropical biodiversity is actually key to life, that it has the most diverse amount of species. So as long as warming and CO2 levels increase that, then there's no reason why we'd cause the collapse of biodiversity. He doesn't extend the impact to that anyway. Also extend our soil loss evidence indicates that it will lead to the seeds of biodiversity forever as long as we increase the nutrients that are within the soil, and that is uniquely caused by CO2-induced photosynthesis that happens within plants. Also extend our ITSO evidence indicates that
CO2 fertilization actually increases photosynthesis and plant growth in both C3 and C4 plants. It actually increases stomata growth, which increases the amount of reproductive capacity that each of those have. And also, our ITS indicates that adaptation will check the impacts of oscillation and runaway warning. And our STINGR also indicates that we'll adapt to current warming, that there's only a risk of temperature rise benefits. And our PIM indicates that it's empirically denied. We ravage habitats in species in the status quo for multiple reasons, other alternate causalities, which means that there's no terminal impact to any biodiversity claims, and to be swamped by our Ice Age arguments anyway. And our Avery evidence indicates that warming is critical to tropical biodiversity, which, like I said above the bottom, and is our Ice Age evidence is just incredible. There's no, I mean, our evidence indicts theirs, and it's the biggest impact on the ground, which they can see. So, whatever.
Do you have the two-way seat?
There's lots of support for you in the district, so.
We need the two-way seat. We still don't have it. Can you grab this one? Thanks.
I always thought you guys rock, and I wouldn't miss not having to be able to jump.
Thanks, man.
We miss you.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you back in the room.
It's always fun.
Thanks.
Last year.
Hey, Nirav, can you try and print that card?
The Agency France press card?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you need any of it immediately, you can look around. If not, we'll be cleaning and circle it through.
Hey, Henry. You're still missing the products from the Ice Age stuff? That's probably all we're doing.
It was on my laptop.
Johnny wants all, they want all this table right here. Wants all the NAC stuff. I don't know. They need all the warming shit. He wants warming shit. He wants NAC warming. All of it. I think I signed and gave this to you.
Yeah, I got you. I want the northern. Absolutely. I just need the other guy. That's all. And then,
Anything else besides Ice Age answers?
it's all done, I'm going to try to collect as much I want to see with stuff, anything that I can help.
Oh man, do you really want all of our drawers?
Or would you rather anything like I could either read those to help me transcribe, or I could try to hear it on the tape.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't want to do that.
you don't have to. Let us know
Yo,
what you want to do.
just give us a minute to pack it.
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
Johnny, Carter wants to talk to you guys.
Did they have all their cards back?
Emory, do you have your cards back?
How about the Ice Age back?
You have the Ice Age.
I don't think we
Carter looks that. All right, let's look through shit.
The two-way C card.
All right, guys.
We'll start.
Green start.
No.
Come on, if I look all.
Okay.
We're starting.
Longest highlighting on all the cards is right.
Hey,
Yeah, and the other.
He's at the bar, for real. Like, this is,
He's in the bathroom.
Is he at the GDI group right now?
He getting his pillow to go to the GDI urinal. He getting his pillow. Well, that's why I'm trying to tell Johnny when he's bring him to look. He's
You don't know Johnny. Take him out of
You can have Cody represent you.
I'll be honest.
He's probably got a newspaper.
Probably.
The fashion relay giant group.
Blue.
Okay, I'm going to announce from down here again. I want to thank you all for everything this weekend. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Emil. Great job.
Thank you. Where did I take Since we've moved into Tuesday, I won't delay this any longer. The debate between Emory on the affirmative and North Texas on the negative. The decision is a 9-0 for the affirmative from Emory. Our second place trophy goes to North Texas, Nirav, Patel, and Your 2004 CEDA national champions are Emory, Michael Beckley, and Henry Lewis.
I guess we'll start down on this end. For me, it ultimately became a decision that I think that they are Emory's controlling the debate on the Ice Age discussion. Ultimately, I think that their indict of your links into the North Atlantic current and a short circuits your ability to access that impact. Oh, you win, maybe a couple of million people dying due to warming. With this agency, France Press, there is some nuclear proliferation, which is what that evidence indicates. But their impact is much larger than the impact that you're winning at that level. And I think that their warming stops the global cooling and the transition to an ice age that would happen.
I thought both the quality and development of Emory's Ice Age evidence was significantly better. Once I resolved that Ice Age is the biggest impact in the debate, the rest of your warming stuff doesn't matter to an incredible degree. I mean, yes, some people die because of wars and famine and so on, and this is tragic, but necessary sacrifices to hold off an Ice Age, I suppose. Their evidence about the North Atlantic current is significantly better. Not only are there indicts, for one thing, this debate happens in a couple of different ways. If you win this indict argument, it helps you, but it doesn't necessarily help you all that much, really. I thought maybe you spent a disproportionate amount of time in the in the 2NR on this argument, because if you do win it, it calls into question some of the arguments you've made, but you need to, these indicts have to be much more specific to beat particular claims that particular authors have made, especially in the context of their Ice Age evidence, which isn't all written by the same paid-off oil hacks. And even if it is, I think that the portions of your evidence, especially the Gelbspan evidence you read, might not be the right ones to prove that there is an impact to this kind of bias. Your evidence largely says, like, well, they've been on TV and said that warming isn't real, which I'm sure that it would freely admit. But once they win a lot of this stuff, then I think that they probably win this entire discussion about the indict a little bit. Even your best piece of evidence is your AFP evidence, but this evidence says that there are reasons not to trust public sources, essentially, like the Pentagon, which is the same thing that their evidence says, that public funding distorts the way that scientific progress goes down, and that people in the public sphere compete for funding more than people in the private sphere do. It seems in that case, although I didn't vote on this argument because they never made it, even if you win that their evidence is sponsored by oil companies, that may actually be good, because those oil companies are the private sector rather than the public sector, and are more likely to produce beneficial effects, I suppose. Their evidence about the North Atlantic current is, I think, significantly better. Their evidence calls into question the idea of global circulation at all, which means that it's difficult for you to win a turn to their Ice Age stuff. And their evidence also establishes an extremely quick time frame for it, probably because their evidence is written by people with questionable scientific credibility in the real world. It's of incredible quality because these people are on a massive defensive, defending an argument which is probably kind of stupid in scientific terms. But their evidence says the Ice Age could happen tomorrow and so on. It outweighs the detonation of every nuclear weapon on the Earth immediately in all countries and so on. So both its impact and its time frame are relatively quick, which means the rest of your warming offense isn't relevant. And if they control the direction of the link argument, you all concede that the impact to an Ice Age is massive. I think that they managed to control that direction quite well.
I also think that I agree. Ice Age is the biggest impact in the round. We could have done more development of some of your scenarios on a magnitude level, but they have evidence that says it's worse than every nuclear weapon exploding on the Earth. So definitely is a huge impact. I think that they're controlling the uniqueness on the debate too, and you have some good evidence here, but I think that the affirmative wins that temperature data right now is proving that Ice Age is coming in the status quo. And then I agree that their evidence on the North Atlantic currents is better, both on the indictment level and probably just the cards that they read that says that is not true at all. So, and I think that your Gelbspan evidence that indicts all of these people simultaneously is not really well warranted for why each of them would be bad. It kind of says these people always come on and say this isn't a crisis, but it doesn't really specifically say why. But their indicts of your evidence is kind of specifically saying these specific arguments that are being made in the evidence, the North Atlantic currents debate with recirculation theories are just wrong. So it seemed like you had some general things, and they had specific indicts of those.
I think one issue is that you both have considered links to this indite-pro-dite debate. I mean, it's clearly true that they have authors who hate your authors and vice versa. So the relevant question is not, does Gelbspan mention Sherwood Itso, but it's what is the reason he gives for why Itso's not credible. And at that level, I actually don't think that the section of the Gelbspan card you read really does say very much. It kind of says they hype it up, they have interests, and their evidence addresses that everybody has interests and says that that's even more pronounced in the realm of public funding. Another thing that I do think actually matters is that, who is this guy Gelbspan? Really the only qualification on your evidence is that he's a, quote, expert and that he won a Pulitzer Prize. And they read a card that says that's a lie, that he doesn't even have a Pulitzer Prize. So, I mean, that's not a super extended part of the debate, but it does kind of make me wonder, why should I even believe that Gelbspan's claims against some of their authors? And maybe even more fundamentally than that, is the application of that to the debate. I just don't think that that is sweeping enough in the part of the card you read to say that that automatically means I kind of disregard the specific nature of their answers to your kind of North Atlantic currents debate. It seems that an easy way to resolve as a judge is that, there are kind of these general pro-dite indites on both sides, but the ones that should determine the debate for me is the question of what happens with these currents. And on that, I think that other judges have spoken to why their evidence is just a lot better. I kind of thought that the best shot for the AF was this AFP card. And I do think that there is an issue for me of what the 1AR answer to this was. It was kind of chunked at the bottom of the debate, and the 2NR makes this sort of fairness thing that I at least did want to mention. I mean, I kind of retraced this debate, and I guess thought that the 1NR explanation of this argument was just that even hawks concede that warming is true. I don't think that you made the next claim that not only is warming true, but like all warming science is biased. I don't think the 1NR really makes a strong sweeping bias claim that indicts their evidence. And so when the 1AR, which by the way was fantastic, best speech of the debate, really awesome, 14 cards, all that stuff. When he says that we're answering warming and the internal assumptions of your card, I kind of think that's a reasonable response to the way that that card's applied in the debate. Now, it's certainly fair in the 2NR to say this is a sweeping indict of your junk science, but I don't even really think that the evidence does say that. I mean, it more says that there's a particular study that Bush didn't want released because it might hurt him politically. I don't think that that means that all studies by the coal industry are necessarily biased. It is also true that the 2AR claim that, Bush wants this study is not very coherent. I mean, the evidence that they read says that this is going to smear the Bush administration. So your kind of assertion that, no, this is Bush who's trying to promote it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But, in the end, this kind of is just one study and not a strong sweeping claim. And in addition, it also doesn't really provide any reason why that particular study is more qualified than theirs. In fact, in comparison, the AFP evidence really just cites a study by two people. This guy, Peter Schwartz, who is internally quoted as a CIA consultant. Well, that's great. And also Doug Randall of Global Business of Shell. So there's like one business guy, but that's not a scientist. I get that you could read a card from that guy who's like, there's a sweeping conspiracy and the oil industry has bought it off. But it doesn't even really say that. It just says this guy used to be in the private sector with Shell, and now he's with the CIA, which maybe discredits him. And then Doug Randall, who's like of Global Business Network. I mean, it's not really a very strong defense of who your people are vis-a-vis theirs, particularly on the question of the specifics of this ocean circulation debate, where their evidence internally cites like multiple professors of oceanography who seem to be qualified in that area. I guess the other thing I would mention is just impact debate. I kind of thought that in the 2NR you weren't super aggressive on what your impacts were, and that AF was winning defense to a lot of the just kind of generic sea level rise, rapid warming, resource wars have lots of kind of alternate causalities, and just impact calc. It seemed like you were going all in on we have to link turn back ice age, and maybe a different strategy in the block would be to just read more defense on the question of whether warming can solve the ice age. I think that there's tensions in the AF strategy when they, on the uniqueness debate, start to read cards that ice age is inevitable because of the axis of the Earth. It seems like that's something that overwhelms a little bit of CO2 in the atmosphere. I don't get why that necessarily could offset it. And they have some cards that say that this is our only hope or something like that. But I think you could execute a strategy maybe where you said there won't be an ice age. If there is, it's inevitable. Warming's not going to solve that. Play some more defense on this. This debate kind of got huge, and on this particular issue, I don't think you needed to straight turn it as much as you just needed to make it go and win the debate on CO2 ag. I think your evidence was stronger.
Yes, I'm all.
I guess I agree almost wholesale. I would only add a couple of things. Number one is I just think that you, as Mike was just alluding to, I think you just got locked into this ice age debate and really lost track of a lot of your other offense. I mean, maybe that's because the impact argument was so large. I even think that there's adaptation and oscillation arguments extended in the 1AR that aren't really answered in the 2NR, except to say this shit was above, which I think, I don't really think that's true. I can't trace to where the 2NR is really. Yeah, I can't trace feedback.
You can be extending hard feedback.
Yeah, I mean, you extend it.
What was the 1AR answer?
I mean, they extend, at the point on the flow where they extend this evidence, I don't have you saying anything seconds above, and I don't really, if it got lumped in with the rest of the ice age debate, then they got lost in the replay. The other thing is actually directed for you all. I think that one thing that we're all kind of glossing over is you could have done a lot more with this, with your indicts evidence. I mean, I think you're right in the 2AR that you're beating them, you're clubbing them with these indicts arguments, but you don't really go the whole distance with this Michaels and Balling evidence to talk about which specific evidence that they've read as part of the public funding that should be discounted, or at least even going so far as to say that the evidence should be tilted in your favor when we're reading it, something of that sort. I think that if you win this, then you should really push it a lot more as to what is evaluated in the evidence. But I don't have anything new to add. So.
I have very little new to add, and Simon's actually just got the really only point that I wanted to make that was different than anybody else about the bias debate, the indict-pro-diet debate. I did think that the app was way ahead on feedbacks, and I think they make an argument that says feedbacks is crucial to your internally to get to the North Atlantic Current. And I think your Bernard evidence and your reinsurance magazine evidence is quite frankly far inferior to their two EDSO cards and their Graham-Posky evidence about Greenland that says that cooling happens slower than warming does. So I think that they have better evidence that talks about feedbacks, and I don't think there's really any good argument to this except for extend Bernard in the 2NR, and I think that is a point of the debate that really does a lot to the rest of your offense, even if you were to win, that the rest of your offense had an impact outside of your Ice Age arguments.
Do you think that the 1AR specifically extended the feedbacks for specific feedbacks?
Specific feedbacks, not just like feedbacks, but like specific external to Ice Age. No, I mean in terms of the Ice Age.
No, they extended their historical evidence, which is the INSO arguments, and they extend their Greenland evidence. And really, if everyone's only extending it, I think their evidence is higher quality, and that's all I'm saying. I think their evidence on the question of feedbacks is quite frankly higher quality than the reinsurance magazine evidence or the Bernard evidence.
Their INSO weak evidence also says vast positive feedbacks are necessary to stop an Ice Age.
I mean, of course, it's referring to evidence studies done as well.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, separate debate, I suppose.
That's all.
I also don't have a whole lot new to add other than I would say that you should not interpret the 9-0 decision as this was a crush, at least not in my mind for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that I think that if you are able to win the uniqueness debate on the Ice Age, I came really close actually to voting negative, if for no other reason, because I think you've got two pieces of evidence that talk about why, while their Ice Age claims are accurate, they won't happen for another 70,000 years, that talk about the orbit of the Earth in terms of the changes that have taken place over the last 11,000 years. And I think you make a mistake in not highlighting that more. I think you have to win that portion of the debate. And after it becomes clear that the 2AR is sort of kicking your ass on the uniqueness question, I think the rest of the debate becomes very difficult for you to even have a shot at. I do want to highlight one card though, that you've got one card that says that while the orbit specifically is true, that the orbit has changed in the last 11,000 years, that makes it such that we won't have another Ice Age for 70,000 years, underlined in one of the answers to Ice Age that you never read in the debate. And I think that alone, if highlighted in the 2NR, at least makes a difference in the way I evaluate the debate. At the same time, maybe not, because they're playing grade D on most of the impact debate, specifically the tropical hotspots and the adaptation arguments.
Let me jump back in real quick. I think one way you could execute the strategy you just talked about is to really stick them with the 2AC impact evidence to terrorism. They said terrorism causes extinction, and then they hedge against that in the 1AR and 2AR on your AFP evidence by being like, oh, it's just a bomb. I mean, for me, I don't really care, like if it's quadruple extinction or one extinction. I mean, that's the same impact. And so if you say their own card says one nuclear terrorism equals extinction, we're clearly winning short-term nuclear terrorism based upon our AFP evidence. If we kind of just win the general climate debate, which you're in better shape on than the rest of the kind of specific cooling shift debate, and then you could say we have a short-term extinction impact, they have a 70,000 year away extinction impact.
I think the debate for me came down to a couple key questions that don't differ very much from the rest of the panel, is which science do I prefer, and then how do I evaluate that, and then the time frame analysis. I think had the impact analysis with the time frame stories been differently, I perhaps could have seen this, I think, a different way, but their evidence to me was far superior. in a couple areas, especially on the orbit. At least for me, I read the field of these cars, and they seem to me to really be entering that back on point. The one comment that I would like to add, and all this did not factor into my decision calculus, the Andy Marshall study that was commissioned by the Pentagon really wasn't a scientific study that was done. Peter Schwartz is a scenario developer that talks about how can we reimagine the world and then what comes out of this. And this card has been used a lot, but that's why I think that at least when I read Peter Schwartz, it doesn't evaluate in my decision, but him being a CIA analyst doesn't really play into the calculus, at least the way the story is spun, but that's just a footnote to this.
I want to put just a little different spin on this. I don't disagree at all with what any of the previous panelists suggested. I think it comes down to me, there can be a lot more work rhetorically and persuasively done, I think, even if it's just 30 seconds of framing by both the 2AR and the 2NR. So what I ultimately am looking for is the fidelity between the claims being advanced in the 2NR and the 2AR by the evidence that I need to read afterwards, and I just find that the affirmative evidence is answering back on point a lot better.
Can I ask a general question? Aside from our evidence being worse than our highlighting the wrong gold-spent evidence, what is the reason why government funding is worse than Mexico funding?
Because it creates an entire paradigm where everybody who's in the research community thinks that the most lucrative source of funding is coming from the government, and so it creates pressure to fall within that paradigm so that there are grants available that have a much larger bottom.
You know,
for
Texaco
the
funds
amount of
like
money.
10 times more than.
Yeah, I understand that, but this is the evidence that they read, and you don't really have anything that speaks. I mean, it seems like you're.
The evidence from Bowling, right?
Yeah, it's Michael's involvement.
It's still hard to resolve that. I mean, all the evidence is biased, but I can't discard all the evidence. I mean, it just seems like we should default to the particular questions being debated. And so I don't really think the index debate is as decisive as either team may be based on.
The only indicts that are extremely specific and of high quality are, I think, are their Calvin indicts.
The Bradley evidence about Calvin.
Yeah, it's the Bradley evidence. It says not only is this
No,
guy a
I
jackass,
say
but the guy across the street who has a PhD says the opposite is true. Understood.
Their defense of their
That's their
oceanographers is high quality in that evidence as well. I think that Bradley evidence is the best indite-prodite evidence clearly read in the paper. I don't think it's even close.
Thank you.
Thanks.